6 years of marriage shattered in one night. She stood there in the doorway, practically naked, daring me to come closer. Roses in my hand, I thought I was walking into an apology. Instead, I was walking into a nightmare. Bound to a chair, helpless, I watched as he stepped out of the shadows wearing my robe. My wife, my Susie, smiled and whispered, "Now it's my turn to have fun." And then, they made me watch. This wasn't betrayal. It was punishment. And the worst part? The revenge had only just begun. Friday, 6:10 p.m. Rush hour traffic has never looked so good, I think to myself as I slowly drive along I-20, heading out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. After being on the road for a week and a half, anything looks better. I have to admit, just 10 minutes ago, I wasn't sure how great it would feel to be home. I had a big argument before I left and slammed the garage door in frustration. My calls home during the trip didn't really help ease the tension between me and Susie. I made those calls more because I felt I should than because I wanted to talk. But being away did allow both of us to think. I realized that I share the responsibility for our troubles just as much as Susie does. Like many couples, we often disagreed, and one of our biggest points of conflict was about our relationship. I felt she was too focused on her job as an assistant district attorney and not enough on us. She thought I cared more about my career than our relationship, and she felt ignored unless I wanted her attention for something else. I often found myself questioning my choice to marry another lawyer. I remember starting the argument that Wednesday morning. I casually mentioned that it would have been nice if she had come home at a decent hour the night before I left. Susie has a fiery temper like mine, and that spark ignited a big fight. The argument ended with me storming out. We exchanged hurtful words, including comments about how we could improve our relationship. It took a while for my anger to cool before I could think clearly about Susie and our marriage. I realized she is sensitive to my comments about her job, just as I am about hers. We both need to be more aware of each other's feelings. We've been so focused on our work that we've neglected our relationship. The things we say and do, along with the time apart, have chipped away at what we built together. But even after this tough week, a single phone call at the luggage carousel brightened my day. Susie's voice was like music to my ears, a sound I hadn't heard in over a year. Her mention of something special made me want to dash to the parking lot instead of waiting for the bus. I can only chuckle at myself now as I sit in heavy traffic. I remind myself to take deep breaths as I try to reach what I hope will be a warm, welcome home. As I get closer to our house, I look at the dozen roses I picked up on my way from the airport. I wince at the thought that I didn't get her anything for our 6th anniversary tomorrow. I feel bad for not wanting to find a gift until I received that important phone call. Fortunately, tomorrow is Saturday, giving me time to get her something special. With a sigh of relief, I turn the last corner and drive down the final block. We've lived here since we got married because I inherited the house from my uncle. Sometimes I blame this old place for our marriage issues. It's a well-established neighborhood, and our home is at the end of a short street with just one close neighbor. I pull into the driveway and press the button for the garage door. Not surprisingly, it doesn't work. It seems there's always something off in this house, which is part of why I blame it for our struggles. But I refuse to let this be a problem. I park my car and quickly head around to the trunk to grab my suitcase. "Jake," I hear from inside the house. I look up to see Susie at the door, leaning against the frame in a lovely outfit. "Why don't you leave the luggage until later?" she suggests with a smile. Without looking away from her, I toss my briefcase into the trunk and close the lid. I walk toward the front door, a little dazed, but somehow I manage to reach the door without tripping. At the last moment, she turns to face me and wraps her arms around me, tilting her head for a kiss. I realize she's dressed lightly, standing there on our front step, then lean down to kiss her. Our kiss is gentle at first. As our lips touch, they part and become more playful. I taste the hint of smoke, a reminder that I haven't yet convinced her to quit. I briefly worry about my breath after having a beer on the flight, but any concern disappears when she pulls me closer and we kiss more deeply. I wrap my right arm around her back, and without breaking our kiss, I lift her up into my arms. I carry her over the threshold and gently kick the door shut behind us. She gently holds my face in her hands and kisses me with deep affection. Her embrace feels warm, and we slowly make our way into the bedroom, her body pressing against mine. I can sense the closeness between us, both physically and emotionally. I reach up to loosen my tie, but she places her hand over mine, stopping me. "Let me take care of this," she says softly. "Just relax for a moment. I've got everything planned for the next little while." I smile, letting her take the lead as she guides me to a nearby chair. She glances at me with a playful smile. "You'll see what I mean soon," she says with a teasing tone as she starts to loosen my tie and lets it drop to the floor. She lifts my arm to unfasten the button on my sleeve while I rest my hand on her thigh. She meets my eyes, and I can sense the intensity between us. Her movements are deliberate, and I feel the connection deepen as she continues to unbutton my shirt. Without a word, she works her way to unfastening my belt, and soon my pants are undone. Her actions are unhurried, but there's a clear sense of anticipation between us. She steps back for a moment and helps me take off my shirt before kneeling down, her hands moving to remove my shoes. I close my eyes, enjoying the quiet moment we're sharing, feeling the comfort and closeness. Her hands move with care, and the atmosphere is filled with an unspoken understanding between us. Her hands gently guide me to lift my other leg, and I feel the coolness of the room as my pants slide down. I lower my leg, and she wraps her arms around my waist, guiding me to move in rhythm with her. My mind struggles to catch up with the situation, processing her unexpected behavior. I feel her lips leave me, and I manage to open my eyes, looking down at her with surprise. "Did you enjoy that?" she asks, laughing softly, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "You have to ask?" I reply, continuing the playful back and forth we often share. She stands up and stretches to kiss me on the lips. "Trust me?" she asks with a teasing smile. "Of course," I answer. Without another word, she gently pushes me back into the chair. "What are you up to?" I ask with a grin, settling in. "Shh," she whispers, silencing me playfully. She kneels in front of me, leaning over my lap with a playful smile, making me wonder what she's planning. She moves my left arm to rest on the arm of the chair, and before I realize it, she's securing my arm with a Velcro strap. "What are you doing?" I ask, now more curious. "Shh," she repeats, her smile disarming. I laugh, still unsure of her game, as she secures my other arm and then fastens my ankles to the chair's legs. Her movements are deliberate, as though she's setting up for something. She then takes the belt from my pants, wrapping it around my waist and securing it to the chair. "Comfortable?" she asks, standing up. I take a deep breath, glancing at her as she stands before me. Her outfit, though revealing, doesn't seem familiar. "Is that new?" I ask, unsure. "Yes, do you like it?" she asks, smiling. "It looks great," I reply honestly. "Where did you get it?" "I'm glad you like it," she says, her smile turning into something more knowing. "It's a gift from Tim for our anniversary." "Tim?" I ask, confused. "Surely you remember me," a voice says from behind me. My head spins as I recognize the voice instantly. "What's going on?" I exclaim, trying to move, but I realize I'm stuck. "Susie, let me out of this now!" I demand. Tim Schmidt steps into view, standing behind Susie with a confident look as he wraps an arm around her, pulling her close. My eyes flash with anger and then caution when I see he's wearing my robe. "Susie!" I shout. "I think you look quite comfortable where you are, Jake," Susie replies smoothly. I glance up at her in surprise and notice that the sparkle in her eyes has vanished, replaced by a cold look. "Susie, what's going on?" I ask. "Jake, you've been having your fun for a while and now it's my turn, but I'm not hiding it anymore. You'll see everything." "Susie?" I say, confused and furious. "Jake," she replies sternly, "did you think you could get away with this forever?" "What are you talking about? And keep him away from you!" I shout, noticing Schmidt's presence. "Oh, Jake," she says, a hint of mischief in her voice. "Are you really going to act like you're innocent until the end?" I stand in disbelief as Schmidt gets closer to my wife. Susie seems lost in the moment, her expression distant. "Susie, I really don't understand," I plead. "What did I do? Please stop this. What kind of nightmare is happening?" "Jake, enough. I have seen the pictures of you and Heidi. I have her statement saying she was involved with you." "Heidi?" I stammer in shock. Yes, Heidi. Your secretary? I can't believe you took advantage of her. We've had our arguments, but I always respected you. To betray me is one thing, but to hurt her like this, I honestly have no idea what you're talking about, I yell. Susie, let's talk about this. Just let me go and let's talk. Please don't do this with him. I'm done listening to your lies, she retorts angrily. Help me, Susie says to Schmidt, glancing at me. I feel a moment of relief as she moves away from Schmidt. They come closer to my chair. I briefly think about what I will do when I get free. Should I confront him first or second? I wonder. I just hope nothing has happened between them yet. Hey, what are you doing? I exclaim as both of them grab the sides of the chair and start to tip it backward. I feel the chair start to wobble. Oh no! Susie cries, and suddenly the chair falls. My head hits the hard frame with a loud bang. Oops! Sorry! Heidi laughs, joined by Schmidt's amused voice. What in the world? I shout in frustration. I felt a rush of heat rise to my face. Just be quiet, Jake, Susie said coldly, clearly upset. She moved toward me and sat on my chest, facing me with an unsettling look. Now it's time for some payback, Jake. A little revenge. And who knows, maybe you'll come to understand it, she said, a cruel smile on her face. She gestured toward Schmidt, who walked over and stood beside me, watching her. Susie glanced down at me with a look of disgust and then turned her attention to Schmidt. With a smirk, she opened my bathrobe and I froze, unable to process the situation. Please, Susie, don't do this, I begged. Quiet, Jake. You've been lying to me for years, and now you're going to face the consequences. Susie, I haven't. I don't know what you've heard or seen, but it's not true. You have to believe me, I pleaded. I've seen the photos, Jake. Photos of you with Heidi, she snapped, her voice bitter. She glanced up at Schmidt with a twisted expression, ignoring my pleas. Please, this is all a misunderstanding, I tried again, desperation clawing at me. She shook her head, her face showing no sympathy. I watched helplessly, feeling sick to my core as Schmidt stood there, indifferent to the tension between us. Susie, whatever you think I've done, don't make it worse. Don't do this, I begged again, my voice breaking. She didn't respond, and the atmosphere felt heavy with betrayal and anger. I watched in shock as she leaned closer to Schmidt, completely ignoring me. I felt like the world was collapsing around me, unable to look away from the terrible scene unfolding in front of me. Schmidt, you won't get away with this, I warned, my voice barely steady. Schmidt just smiled, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Susie looked at me, her face showing no remorse, and she laughed, clearly enjoying my torment. Jake, it's too late, she said, her words cutting deep. The room felt colder and I could barely breathe. My stomach churned with anger and pain, and I felt utterly helpless as they continued to mock me. Don't take it personally, Tim. I enjoyed every minute of it, and I plan on doing more, Susie said with a smirk. You're unbelievable, I finally managed to say, my voice low. You have no idea, Jake. You think this is over? I've been in torment for the past 24 hours thinking about how you betrayed me. Now it's your turn to suffer. Then, turning her attention to Schmidt, she said angrily, It's time to finish this. Susie moved and knelt in front of me, holding onto my chair. I realized, in horror, what she intended to do. I couldn't look away, even though I wanted to. She glanced back at me, her eyes cold. I want you to see this, Jake. You should know what it feels like when trust is broken. This is your fault, my revenge. I couldn't bear to watch, but I had no choice. The sounds, the tension in the room, it all felt unbearable. My mind went numb, and I tried to block out what was happening, but every sound cut through me like a knife. The struggle to free myself was pointless. My wrists and ankles ached from trying. I could hear the intensity around me, and each moment felt worse than the last. Every sound, every movement made me feel trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. And then, I heard Susie's voice again, taunting me, though I could hardly process her words anymore. My world had shrunk to this moment of complete misery, with no way out. She leaned closer, looking down at me, her expression unreadable. I've got another surprise for you, Jake, she teased. I looked up, hoping for a shred of mercy, but there was none in her eyes. The weight of everything pressed down on me, both physically and emotionally. There was no escape from this. I'm feeling her legs press against the sides of my head. Clean me up, she says firmly. I let out a muffled scream. My lips close tight. If you do it all, I might be nice to you later, she continues. Again, I scream in frustration and try to shake my head, anger building up inside me. Come on, Jake, just take what's coming to you. With great effort, I turn my head to the side for a quick breath. Leave me alone, I shout back, my rage spilling out. Suddenly, I feel a sharp pain as she grips me harder. Do as I say and I'll ease up. Leave us both alone, I cry out in pain. The pressure increases, making it even worse. Wow, I yell. If you do it, we'll move you and the chair out of here for the rest of the night. Not a chance! I feel her twist. The pain is overwhelming, and then everything goes dark. Sunday, 5:16 p.m. Just between us, Mr. Vickers, I don't believe much of what they say, Nurse Bishop tells me quietly. I understand, ma'am, I reply with a smile as she leads me out into the hallway. Are you sure I can't just leave? I feel awkward making you do all this for someone my size. Don't worry about that, Mr. Vickers. I've handled bigger guys than you my entire life, and I'll keep doing it for a while, she assures me. I believe you, ma'am, I nod sincerely. And please, call me Jake. You seem too nice a person to be caught up in all this, she says, looking at me. I smile, knowing she's trying to gather more information. I'm okay with that. Even those of us outside hospitals know how quickly news spreads. From what the doctor told me, I'm sure I've been the topic of conversation for days. I keep quiet and smile inside, thinking of how this caring nurse has looked after me like a mother this entire weekend. I start to think about my chat yesterday morning with the doctor who admitted me. I can't remember everything since I was still a bit dazed from the medications, but some key points stand out. Your left side will heal completely. It's just swollen and should be okay soon. Your right side is a different issue. The injury cut off its blood supply. It's lucky you got here fast after it happened, or you might have lost it. Now there's only a 50-50 chance it will work well again. What does that mean? If the blood flow improves, it should still be able to produce about half of what it normally would. I'm really worried that if the blood flow doesn't get better, the gland will shrink. In that case, I strongly suggest we remove it. I take a deep breath. But do you think it will get better? I think there's a 50-50 chance. I like to be hopeful with my patients, but I don't want to give you false hope. You should avoid any hard work for the next few weeks and especially stay away from any intimate actions. You need to rest and take it easy until I give you the go-ahead for more activity. I nod in understanding. How did you get hurt, Mr. Vickers? He asks. I look up at him, trying to figure out if he's asking for medical reasons or if he's looking for a story. I decide it's a real question, but don't feel like sharing everything. I'm not really sure, Doc. I think I lost consciousness and I don't remember much. What do you remember? He asks, pressing for more. After thinking for a moment, I say, I think I got caught up in a strange position with my wife and something went wrong. He writes down some notes and meets my gaze. Would you like to explain what really happened? I keep my expression serious and say, that's what I believe happened. He studies me for a moment longer and then writes more notes. I take this chance to ask him a question. How did I end up here, Doc? You don't know, he replies, surprised. I shake my head. The first thing I remember is waking up here this morning, I reply honestly. Based on your chart and what the emergency staff told me, it seems your wife brought you here in an unconscious state. You think so? I ask, curious. Yes. A man and a woman carried you into the emergency room. You were only in your boxers and a robe. They just mentioned that you had been hurt in the lower area and then left. The woman came back soon after with a bag of clothes. She placed the bag by you and tossed your wallet on top, saying you should have an insurance card in it. After that, she left. The emergency staff quickly started treating you. What makes you think it was my wife? I ask. One of the orderlies tried to catch the woman outside to ask more questions about you. He heard an argument between her and the man she was with, and the man called you her husband. I sigh and lean back in my bed. Have there been any calls for me? You'll need to ask the nurses, he replies. He watches me for a moment, his pen still ready to write. You were brought in with some unusual marks on your face, he states clearly, still holding his pen over the chart. I look up at him, confused. I told you it was a very strange situation. He looks back at me for a moment with one eyebrow raised. You did say that, he finally replies. I think we've covered enough for now. You know you're going to have a lot of swelling, especially on one side? I expect it to last at least another week if the blood flow improves. Swelling like this is normal with the injury you have. We have you on some mild pain relief, but once the anesthetic wears off, you might feel quite uncomfortable. Going to the bathroom might be tough too. It's important to keep your pain medication low. I gave you a strong dose of codeine, but now I want to switch you to regular aspirin. It won't work as well for pain, but it'll help thin your blood and improve circulation. But don't hesitate to tell me if it gets too much. For now, try to stay still. He places a hand on my arm. I look up at him carefully. Let me know if it's more than you can handle, he adds firmly. As Nurse Bishop wheels me toward the door, I think to myself, he wasn't joking. I remember other things that happened yesterday. They put in an IV drip, and I reached a point where I really had to use the restroom. It's funny. Until then, I was nervous about looking at myself. They assured me everything would be fine. At least the left side was good, and they had hopes for the right. At that moment, that was good enough for me. But the doctor's warning about going to the bathroom worried me, and I tried to hold on for as long as I could. Eventually, I couldn't wait anymore and tried to get out of bed. The sharp pain reminded me that I needed help. I pressed the call button and Nurse Bishop appeared right away. I told her I needed to use the restroom. She laughed and said I could just go ahead. I raised my eyebrows in surprise and she pulled back the sheet covering me. I saw a tube going from my gown to a bag beside the bed. I smiled and nodded, feeling a bit shy with her there, so I covered myself up again and relaxed. The feeling I had was overwhelming. I had never experienced pain like this before. Well, maybe it was just as bad as before, but it felt really strong. Thankfully, once I started going, the pain began to ease. I closed my eyes, feeling both discomfort and relief. Suddenly, I felt something cool on my forehead, and I opened my eyes to see Bishop placing a damp cloth on me. She reassured me that it wouldn't be nearly as bad the next time, and thankfully, she was right. "That's very kind of you to say that, ma'am," I replied. "You've been such a help this whole weekend, and I really appreciate it. You just needed a little assistance, but not too much. I believe it's not helpful to spoil someone." "I agree, ma'am," I say as she pushes me to the main reception area. I carefully get out of the wheelchair to sign some forms and turn to thank her one more time. "You don't need to do that, young man," she says firmly while pointing at the wheelchair. "You know you have to be taken all the way to the door. Are you trying to make my job harder?" I chuckle. "No, ma'am. I just wanted to stand for a moment." She laughs too and steadies the chair as I sit down again, this time even more carefully. She wheels me the last bit, and suddenly a man in a suit stands right in front of us, making Nurse Bishop stop quickly. "Jacob Vickers?" he asks. I don't recognize him, although he looks somewhat familiar. "Who wants to know?" I reply. "Are you Jacob Vickers?" he asks again. "I might be," I say, keeping my answer vague. He laughs. "We both know you are," he says, and drops an envelope in my lap. "You've been served," he adds before quickly leaving. I wince, feeling a rush of anxiety. "Well, that takes nerve." I hear my nurse say behind me. I stare at the envelope, knowing all too well what it means. My hands tremble as I reach for it. I pause to grip the chair for support and try again. This time, my hands are steadier as I open the seal on the envelope. It's not very thick, which gives me a bit of comfort, and I pull out the papers inside. "Whatever it is, Jake," Nurse Bishop says behind me using my nickname for the first time. I hope it's not as bad as it seems. "It's a TRO. I let out a relieved sigh. It's not great news, but it's better than I feared, I think to myself. "What's a TRO, Jake?" Bishop asks. "Temporary restraining order," I say quietly. "I can't get within 300 yards of my home or my wife's office." "Oh, no, son," she says. "But it could have been worse, right?" "Yes, ma'am, it could have. This means your wife isn't picking you up?" "I wasn't expecting her. I couldn't reach her at all this weekend." "I'm sorry to hear that, Jake. So who will pick you up?" she asks while wheeling me toward the door. She locks the wheelchair and I carefully get out again. "I didn't call anyone else, ma'am." "Jake, you shouldn't go home by yourself," she says, stopping when she understands what that means. I laugh to ease her worry. "That's true, ma'am, but I'll be fine. I'll take a taxi downtown and get a hotel room until I figure things out." She smiles and I see a tear in her eye. I wipe it away and thank her once more for all she has done for me. Wearing the wrinkled suit I had on Friday night, which had been stuffed in my gym bag, I carefully step to the curb and wave for a taxi. Sunday, 6:18 p.m. "What do you mean it's been declined?" I ask in surprise. "I'm sorry, sir, but that card won't work." I look at the hotel clerk. Yelling won't help. I take back my American Express card and give him my Visa. "Try this one," I say hopefully. He gives a sad smile and takes the card. I check my wallet. After paying the $25 taxi from the hospital to downtown and giving a tip, I have barely $50 left. "I'm sorry, sir, but this one is declined too." I'm not shocked. I expected this as I handed him the second card. I thank him for trying and turn away from the desk. I can feel the clerk's eyes on me as I walk away. I feel uncomfortable, like I'm carrying bad luck with money. I walk to the corner of the courtyard by Marriott Hotel. At least I have my phone, I think with a laugh. I dial the customer service number on the back of my American Express card. After going through several options on their phone menu, I finally reach a real person. The customer service representative confirms my worry. Our joint card was canceled yesterday. I ask what I need to do to open a new account just in my name. One thing I appreciate about American Express is their great service. Using my home address, I quickly set up a new account, but I can't use it until tomorrow. Luckily, the main American Express office in Dallas is just a few floors up in the same building where I work. I ask them to send my new card to their office in Dallas, where I can pick it up tomorrow. One problem solved, but I still need a place to stay for the night. I spot an ATM across the street at a bank and think, sometimes cash is the best option. Although it takes me a bit longer than usual, I make my way across the street to the ATM. I slide my card in, half expecting it to swallow it. To my surprise, it accepts my PIN, and just as I'm about to make a withdrawal, a thought tells me to check the balance first. With a sigh, I look at the balance in our bank account, just a little over $3. Two problems remain. I have no cash, and I still have no place to stay for the night. I shiver as a cold winter breeze cuts through my suit jacket. It's hard for me to do this, but sometimes you have to lean on your family. I take my cell phone out of my pocket and dial my parents' number. "Hi, Mom," I say when I hear her voice. There's a brief silence, and then I hear her set the phone down. In the background, I hear Mom calling for Dad, saying, "Your son is on the line." "Jake." I finally hear his deep voice. I feel a small sigh of relief. At least my father's voice sounds familiar. "Hey, Dad," I respond. "I'm guessing you're in a bit of trouble down there, boy. What's going on?" "I take it Susie called you?" I ask. "Yesterday morning. We couldn't believe it. She says she has proof." "Dad, please don't believe it. I know less about what's happening than you probably do. I can tell you one thing. I didn't do anything wrong with Heidi." "That's your secretary?" "She's my administrative assistant, yes." "Same thing. Susie claims she has a statement from your assistant and pictures as well. I don't see how you can get out of this, Jake. Sometimes it's better to just admit it and move on." "I agree, Dad, but I'm not going to admit to something I didn't do." "You're saying these pictures are fake? That this assistant is trying to hurt you?" "Dad, I really don't know, but I can't believe Heidi would do something like this. I wish I had more answers, but I don't. What I do know is that I did not do anything with her." A long pause follows. I can almost sense Dad thinking. "Jake, have you been unfaithful to Susie?" he asks directly. "Honestly, Dad, I swear I've never thought about it. Sure, I've noticed some attractive people and may have joked a bit, but nothing serious." The silence stretches again. Finally, he says, "Jake, I remember when you were about 14 and you lied about something big. I punished you then, and I'm still here to help you now if you're being dishonest. I don't think you're lying, but you need to be honest with yourself." "Dad," I say, feeling relieved. Hearing that means a lot to me. "You're still in a tough spot, boy." "Yeah, but it helps to know someone believes me. I guess Mom isn't happy about any of this." "Don't worry about your mother. She took Susie's side right away. I have to admit I did too when I heard Susie's story. I know you're a clever talker, but you have a tricky situation to handle. I'll talk to your mother. But once you sort things out, don't forget to call us." "Thanks, Dad. I really hate to ask this, but I need some help," I say as I start walking back to the hotel. "I figured as much. She told us she was going to take money from the accounts because she thought you might do it first. How much do you need? She thought I would take everything out, huh? So instead, she's doing it first? Did she mention she canceled all our credit cards too? I shake my head in disbelief at how different my wife seems. Well, first, I need a place to stay tonight. I'm not going to have any money until tomorrow, so I need to walk back to a hotel. Could you talk to them and pay for the room? That's not a big deal. I can do that. That's not everything, Dad. I had a feeling it wouldn't be that simple. I'm going to need a good amount of money to figure this out. I think around $10,000. Can you send it to me? $10,000? What do you plan to do, hire a whole team? I hear someone shouting in the background, and I feel bad for my dad. Look what you've done. Now I've got your mom upset. She'll be fine, Dad. You can send the money, right? Of course, but do you really need that much? I can't be sure how much I'll need, but it should cover things. That much, huh? Dad, I really appreciate this. Wait until you see my bill. One more thing, son. What is it, Dad? Go see Bud tomorrow, first thing. That might be good advice. You thought differently? My dad asks. I laugh. It's the first real laugh I've had in a few days. Sunday, 9:29 p.m. As I'm getting ready for a shower, my phone rings. I pick it up, expecting it to be my dad about the money. But seeing Susie's name makes my heart race for several reasons. Susie, I didn't expect your call. Jake, this isn't a friendly call. Just meet me in my office tomorrow at 9:30. How am I supposed to do that? What if I can't make it? You will if you want to talk. I'll do my best to be there, but you know that I can't meet you at your... I stop when the call ends. Who does she think she is? Angrily, I start to type, TRO, you're a problem, but pause. I take a deep breath and count backwards from 10. When I reach 0, I delete the extra words and just send the first 3 letters. 15 minutes later, my phone rings again. Did you forget about the TRO? I ask her. Yes, but it still matters. We can meet in my office. With my schedule, I can't meet anywhere else. I'm not meeting in your office, I say, trying to stay calm. Why not? It's close to your place and very convenient. Do I need to explain? I'm not putting myself at risk. I can't break the TRO. The TRO is only a problem if I make it one. Since I'm inviting you, I don't see the issue. I definitely see it. You're a prosecutor with a TRO against me, and your office is nearby. You just caught me off guard 2 days ago. What promise can you give me that I'm not stepping into another trap like last time? She exhaled loudly through the phone. You should know me better. I thought I did, but I just spent 2 long days in the hospital. If you want to meet tomorrow, let's pick a safe place. I ended the call and shook with frustration. How can she do this to me? Doesn't she see how I feel about her? How could she think I would ever betray her? What could have made her act this way without asking me directly? Sunday, 10:31 p.m. I stepped onto the chilly balcony of my hotel room with a bottle of water in hand. After taking a warm shower, I finally had a moment to think. What planet did my plane land on 2 days ago? I wondered. Looking back over the past 2 days, one thing was clear. I had no idea what was happening. The trouble started early yesterday when 2 police officers arrived shortly after my chat with the doctor. I almost told them everything when my cautious instinct told me to stay quiet. While Susie acts quickly and decisively, I prefer to take my time and think things through. Susie's quick thinking helps her in a courtroom. She knows how to capture a moment and reveal the truth. I, however, like to be careful and calculated. No, I reminded myself. Talking to the police wasn't smart. I really didn't want anyone to find out what happened on Friday night, especially since that guy Schmidt was involved somehow. It's already bad enough that I was the topic of hospital gossip, and all they could do was guess what happened and how Susie was connected. I knew I had to keep this under wraps, and if I'd talked to the police, I would have lost the little control I had left. With a heavy heart, I thought about how Susie fit into this. With Schmidt in the picture, I believed she might have been under a lot of pressure. While I had seen her be strong and determined before, I had never seen her so angry and out of character as she was that night. There had to be more to this than just rumors about me, and it seemed Schmidt was at the center of it all. I wondered if Susie was just a victim like me, but what if she was part of it? If that was true, then I could see no way out. If Susie is involved, then my choice not to talk to the police seems even smarter. Her role as an ADA might make things harder for me. I think back to my time with the police in the hospital. What started as friendly questions turned into tough ones because I didn't really remember much. I don't think they believed me when I said I couldn't recall anything from the moment I got into my car at the airport until I woke up in the hospital. But their last question hit me hard. They asked who they should tell about my situation. That made me realize that I didn't have anyone I wanted them to reach out to. I had to call my parents earlier, and that was hard. I've been distant from my father for more years than I'd like to say, and while I used to have a good relationship with my mother, that has changed too. The only person I would really consider telling is Susie, but she is exactly the person I don't feel comfortable reaching out to now. Susie is also an only child. From our talks, I know her father left when she was a teen, and she doesn't speak to her mother at all. The only time I've met her mother was at our wedding. Plus, I started to realize that I'm not sure who my friends really are. I know Susie has already shared her side with my parents. Who else has she talked to? There are more questions than answers for me right now. Monday, 7:57 a.m. Jake, I don't know how to tell you this, Tom says, closing the door to my office. I lean back in my chair and look at Tom Weston, the managing partner of the firm and a friend for a long time. I gesture for him to take a seat at my desk. We don't have time for that. By the rules, you shouldn't even be in your office right now, Tom says, unable to make eye contact. Just tell me what's going on, I reply, sensing something serious given the events of the last few days. An urgent HR meeting happened yesterday to talk about some recent accusations about your conduct. You have a formal HR interview at 8 a.m. This morning? I ask, surprised. Yes. And you held an HR meeting on a Sunday? Jake, this is serious. The meeting was called because of your position in the firm. I'm here as the managing partner, but also as a friend. You're in a difficult spot, and you have some important decisions to make very soon. Where's the meeting? I ask, standing up. Jake, as a friend, I urge you to stay calm. Let's go. The meeting is in the executive conference room. Tom leads the way out of my office and toward the conference room. I look at my watch and see it's 8 a.m. Heidi isn't at her desk. She's usually very prompt, so I expected she might not come in today. Still, I need to talk to her. Who will be at the review meeting? I ask. Just me and Hinckley. I had to choose Evans to fill in for you. Rolansky and Schmidt are the other two. Schmidt, I say, surprised. Tom flinches, glances at me briefly, then looks away. I know he's not your favorite, but this is how it goes. You basically set up the executive HR review process yourself. I'm not happy about it either. I know it really well, I think to myself. I quickly remind myself that 5 managers or higher are involved. Tom is the managing partner, Hinckley is the HR manager, and I used to hold the general counsel position. The other 2 are chosen for each situation, one by HR and the other by the managing partner. I guess you chose Rolansky, I ask. I'll act like I didn't hear that so we can stay friends, he replies. Tom holds up his hand to stop me. I shouldn't tell you this, but I can't let you go in there without some preparation. They're going to offer you a separation package to leave. The group decided it's best for the firm to avoid any lawsuits or bad press. Resigning is the way to go. I couldn't stop this, Jake. All I could do is make sure the package was as good as it could be. I lean back, feeling stunned. I can't believe this is happening. How did everything go wrong so quickly, I wonder? Jake, are you all right? Tom asks with concern. No, I'm not, Tom. Just give me a moment. You're going to have to be ready, Jake. I know that, Tom. Just give me a minute to gather myself. That came out stronger than I meant, and I see Tom smile at me. When this is over, I hope we're still good friends, he says. Don't worry about that, Tom. All right, let's go. Tom leads me around the corner and stops for a moment outside the conference room door. He looks at me once more before opening the door. I follow him in and see 4 people sitting together across the table. Tom takes his place at the head. The only empty chairs are on my side. I choose the middle chair right across from Christy. When our eyes meet for a moment, she quickly looks down at her hands on the table. I respect and admire her a lot. I hired her right after she graduated from UT. I didn't even think about applicants from elsewhere. I wanted someone who understood our local culture and way of life in Texas. I started working with her as a project, but honestly, she didn't need much help. I know her well as a tough coworker, and now she's become a strong rival. Mr. Vickers, Hinckley begins the meeting. You are here for an executive HR review. We had a meeting yesterday where 5 of us discussed claims of inappropriate behavior. These are serious claims and against company rules. Such actions could lead to losing your job. Excuse me for interrupting, I say firmly, not feeling sorry. But I want him removed from this meeting. I point to Schmidt, sitting next to Hinckley. Mr. Vickers, you have no say in who is on this review panel, Hinckley replies. That's true. But I do have a concern since there is known tension between Schmidt and me. Everyone in this room knows about it. If this turns into a lawsuit for unfair dismissal, having someone who is known to be biased on the panel only makes my case stronger. A heavy silence takes over the room after I mention the words unfair dismissal lawsuit. I try to meet the eyes of each panel member, except Schmidt. Miss Hinckley, Schmidt speaks up. I'll step aside if the group prefers, but I must say, while Vickers and I aren't friends, the term tension seems too strong. I believe I can be fair. Does anyone think Mr. Schmidt would be unfair in his role here? Hinckley asks. I look over at Christy. Her face is serious as she meets my eyes. She doesn't look away, and I finally do. She knows, just like I do, that Schmidt can't be impartial. I think to myself, she has learned well. So, if no one believes Mr. Schmidt would be biased. I don't just believe it, I know it, I say, glaring at Schmidt. We've established you cannot change the panel's makeup, Hinckley reminds me. Fine, I reply. You may be planning my end right now, but you're only making things worse for this company. Worse? How so? Rolansky asks. I look at Rolansky and wonder why he is part of this panel. He seems to have only dealt with reviews in his own department and has never been involved in something this important before. Don't encourage him, Hinckley warns. I want to know what he means by that, Rolansky insists. What were the first 4? Rolansky asks firmly. You held an official meeting yesterday, right? I ask Christy, trusting she would be honest. Yes, she answers. I glance at Rolansky. There you go. You started things yesterday during that meeting without me. I have the right to see the evidence. I have the right to speak against what I am being accused of. You denied me those rights. Jake, you know this is a company, and the Bill of Rights doesn't apply here. This isn't a legal matter, Christy replies. But I have rights according to the employment contract we all signed. The contract says I have the right to be in the meeting. I have the right to hear what I'm being accused of and respond both in person and in writing. The HR review process doesn't say that the person being talked about must be present, she counters. Isn't it a little strange to have a meeting without the person it's about there? Plus, the HR guidelines say I have the right to see any claims made against me. I'm both an executive and an employee, so I believe both sets of rules apply. If you look at the policies, there are no conflicting points. I made sure of that, and I wonder how a court would see it. Jake, Tom interrupts. Talking about courts and lawsuits is stressing me out. The point of this meeting is to offer you a severance package. It's a pretty good deal, considering everything. Have I been let go? I ask Tom directly. Tom looks at Christy. I catch her shaking her head slightly. No, he replies. Let's see the offer, I say. Hinckley slides a folder across the table to me. I look at it and then lift it with both hands. I'll think about this and get back to you by the end of the week. Suddenly, the review panel looks at each other. We want you to check the severance package and make a decision now. I sit back, surprised. Tom warned me to be ready and that I'd need to make choices fast. Let me get this straight, I say to buy some time. You want me to look at this offer and decide right now? Yes, Hinckley answers. I can't do that, I reply simply. Then we will take back the severance offer, she says. Hold on, Tom interjects again. Jake, I know this is overwhelming, but what if you go back to your office, consider the offer, and meet us at noon to share your decision? Mr. Weston, Hinckley interrupts. That's not what we agreed on yesterday. Tom gives Hinckley a strong look, stopping her in her tracks. Tom, I say, appreciating the extra time, but it's just not enough. How much more time do you need, Jake? I told you at least until the end of the week. We can't possibly give that much time. Hinckley starts again. Tom, I haven't had a chance to look over these numbers. I haven't seen any of the claims made against me. I need time to prepare a response. Are you saying you haven't seen the affidavit or the photos? Christy suddenly asks. I turn to her. I didn't even know they existed until Friday night, I say, trying not to look at Schmidt. I keep hearing about these troubling documents, but no one has shared them with me, and I want to remind everyone here that no official charges have been made against me. We're trying to avoid that, Jake, Christy says. I don't want to avoid it. Do you have those documents? Christy glances at Tom, then back at me. We have the original affidavit, but only copies of the photos. I want copies of both. Actually, I want the originals of everything. You can make copies if you need to. Jake, we can't give you the original affidavit, and for privacy reasons, we can't share the photos. If we need to have a formal HR review on Wednesday, you can see the documents then. Keep the photos. I believe they are not real anyway, but I need the original affidavit. Jake, we can't do that, Christy replies. If I can't check the original evidence to show it hasn't been changed, it'll only make my case for wrongful termination even stronger. I need that original, and I need until the end of the week at least, I emphasize. I'm sure you have plenty of copies by now, and if the affidavit is real, why would I want to destroy it? You can always print a new one and have it signed again. Jake, can you give us a moment to talk? Christy asks. Sure, I reply, slowly standing up from my chair, which I'm sure Schmidt notices. And Miss Evans? I add. Christy tilts her head, curious, as she often does when she knows I have something important to say. Trust your judgment and your experience, I say, and walk out, leaving the severance package on the table. I close the door and lean against it. I can hear the discussions and disagreements inside. Hinckley and Schmidt seem to be on one side. Schmidt is clearly my opponent, but I've never had an issue with Hinckley before. Why is she being difficult now? Tom is on my side, and it sounds like Rolansky agrees with him. They are arguing that an extra week won't hurt, and could even help avoid bigger legal problems in a wrongful termination case. Hinckley and Schmidt say that the company could face a lawsuit for harassment at any time. If they don't act quickly, it might seem like they accept such behavior. They believe the company has followed the right steps so far and should keep doing so. They are strongly against giving me any documents, even copies. They say I can look at the documents during a formal HR meeting. I listen to both sides discuss the situation. I think Tom made a good choice with Rolansky for us. The one person I haven't heard from is Christy. Just then, I can hear her soft voice and smile to myself. She is really good at helping people. I hear quiet footsteps and I quickly move away from the door just as Tom opens it and asks me to come back in. I close the door behind me and walk to the table. Christy seems to be leading things as she gestures for me to sit down. I smile and say I'd rather stand, not wanting to explain further. Jake, we have a new offer for you. I need until the end of the week to think about it. Would you listen to what I have to say? I nod. We would like you to take the severance package and think it through carefully. Please come back on Wednesday at noon with your decision. Right now, you are not fired. We haven't officially started the HR process yet. Depending on your answer on Wednesday, we may start that process. In the meantime, we will place you on administrative leave. Other than when we ask for you, you cannot be on company property or have access to any documents, whether paper or digital. However, she pauses for a moment, we will give you the original affidavit but not any pictures. We expect you to return it. You can see a copy of the pictures on Wednesday if needed. Christy looks at me, waiting for a response. I feel pleased with their offer. It's almost what I would have wanted. I accept your proposal, without giving up any of my rights according to company policy. Can someone take me to my office to gather some personal items I might need for the next few days? Hinckley starts to say something, but Christy quickly agrees. She looks at Tom, who nods. Mr. Weston will accompany you. The meeting seems to be over, and I pick up the package. I glance at Christy and give a little wink. She doesn't reply, but I think I see the smallest hint of a smile on her face, even if her eyes seem a bit watery. I leave the room first and step aside. I watch as they quietly disperse in different directions. Tom is the last to leave. He looks at me and sighs. You warned me, Tom, I say, placing my hand on his shoulder as we walk back to my office. Monday, 9:31 a.m. Mr. Vickers, could you please follow me? I take a deep breath and stand up, following the receptionist through a set of doors marked with the names Sutter, Klein, and Gambino. Before I walked into my office this morning, Susie texted me that our meeting would be at our family lawyer's office. Usually, meeting with a lawyer is seen as a bad sign, but Vicky has been a friend to Susie and me for many years. I try to smile at her, even though I feel frustrated with her and the few people I've met so far. As I walk past desks and workstations towards Vicky's office, I can sense their looks and hear the whispers behind me. The receptionist brings me to a conference room with frosted glass doors. I open the door and step inside, seeing Vicky sitting next to Susie at the table. There are 2 empty chairs closest to the door. "Please have a seat, Jake," Vicky says. I pull the cushioned chair back from the table and sit down slowly. "Is your lawyer on the way?" she asks. I look at her, confused, then glance at my wife, who suddenly looks down. "First of all, it's good to see you, Vicky. But why do I need a lawyer?" Vicky seems surprised and leans forward slightly. In a softer voice, she says, "You're not planning to represent yourself, right, Jake?" "I need a lawyer?" "Susie texted me last night to come here so we could talk. She originally wanted to meet at her office, but I reminded her about the order and that I wouldn't break it. I was surprised when she asked to meet here, but I thought it might be good. Even after everything that has happened, I'd like to see if we can find a solution. Though, I'm starting to think I might be too hopeful." Vicky looks at Susie. "You didn't tell him?" "I told him to be here at 9:30 a.m. for a discussion. If he thought differently, that's not my fault," Susie replies, her tone flat. "You didn't mention that." Vicky catches herself, looking annoyed. Then she collects herself and adds, "Maybe we should reschedule." "I think we should go ahead," Susie insists. "I want to get this finished." Now, it's clear what this meeting is about. As they say, my mama didn't raise no fool. I've had enough of the tough times over the past few days, and I'm not going to take it anymore. If this is the end, then I'll make my stand. "By the way, Susie, I'm feeling much better now than I did on Friday." Susie's expression turns a bit pale. "Jake, Mr. Vickers, if we continue this meeting, you must not speak to Miss Vickers. I'm going to need you to focus on me for a moment. Vicky, no offense, but I really don't want to hear it. After what Susie did to me on Friday night, she should be worried about serious trouble. That could still happen." Vicky looks surprised by my outburst and then turns to Susie. "What happened on Friday night?" she asks. I glance between them and then laugh a bit. "You didn't tell her?" I say to Susie. "Wow, you must really like keeping secrets. You don't let me know the real reason for this meeting, and now you're hiding important things from your own lawyer? What's going on isn't related to our divorce." I lean back in my chair now that the uncomfortable topic has come up. "You really think that things like wrongful actions and mistreatment won't matter in a court?" "Susie, what haven't you shared with me?" Vicky presses. "I'll explain later, okay?" Susie replies, looking annoyed. "Let's just finish this." Vicky glances at Susie and then turns back to me. "Mr. Vickers, it sounds like you're aware of why we're here." She pauses, looking at Susie again. She slides a stack of papers across the table. At the top is a divorce notice that was filed this morning. I just stare at it, not wanting to touch it. I look back at Susie. "I can't believe you're doing this," I finally say, my voice cracking. "Really?" I gesture at the papers. It's like the ink's still wet. "Jake, I can't stay with you after everything you've put me through. What I've done to you? Seriously?" Susie is silent. She seems like she wants to be anywhere but here. "I didn't do anything wrong, Susie." She turns to me sharply and scowls. "I'm so tired of hearing that, Jake. Why do you keep lying?" "Because I'm telling the truth." "Jake, we have proof." "Then it's not real because it never happened. Why do I keep hearing about all this proof when no one has shown it to me?" Susie simply stares at me and then grabs a folder off a pile of papers from Vicky's desk. She slams it down in front of me. "Here's your proof." I look at her for a moment before focusing on the folder. I pick it up and open it slowly. The first thing inside is a 2-page document. The first page states that I supposedly made my assistant, Heidi Beavis, do things with me multiple times. The second page has a short note saying I need to work on my organization skills to be a better leader. It also has Heidi's signature and is stamped by a notary. I check her signature, and I have to admit it looks like hers, along with her initials on both pages. I put the papers aside and noticed 8 photos of Heidi and me in a motel room. I was shocked. I understood why someone might think the worst, but anyone who knows us would know that wasn't true. I looked at Susie, who was staring at me intensely. "I don't know what to say," I finally said softly. "I can't believe you were careless enough to take pictures." "I didn't take any pictures." Well, you're still making a big mistake. I can't believe you would treat that poor woman so poorly. I met her gaze. You want to know why you can't believe it? Because deep down, you know it's not true. Jake, please don't waste my time. Just look at the pictures. I can't explain this, but I didn't do it. Please just give me some time. Don't rush into anything. Think of Heidi. You can't honestly believe she would do this. Would I allow it? Would Heidi? I'm done, Jake. I know how good you are at telling stories. I'm tired of your games. I've had enough of our life. I don't want to stay with you for even a moment longer. Mr. Vickers, Vicky said firmly. I looked at her as a tear rolled down my cheek. After reviewing the documents, you'll see the proposed agreement is reasonable. Since there are no children, you won't have to worry about child support. Miss Vickers does not want any kind of relationship with you after the divorce, so she won't be asking for alimony. The agreement simply states that your estate should be split evenly. It will also include your severance pay. There are a few personal items you'd like to keep, and those can be discussed. We hope this is fair and that we can proceed with the divorce smoothly. I looked at Vicky, feeling a bit sorry for her. What a difficult position to be in. How can someone be both a lawyer and a friend and then have to take sides? I bit my lip and folded my hands, looking down at the table. I didn't do anything wrong. Those pictures must be fake. That affidavit isn't real either. Heidi wouldn't sign something like that even if it were true. Where did you get this? Who gave them to you, Susie? I looked to her, hoping for support. She suddenly looked away, and I knew. You got these from Schmidt, didn't you? She stayed quiet. When? When did he give you those documents? Susie sighed. Thursday afternoon, she said at last. He came to my office and showed them to me. Wow. You didn't waste any time, did you? My biggest rival suddenly appears and gives you some papers, and you believe him without question? You know he and I were both after the same job, and I was ahead. The only way he could win would be if I was considered untrustworthy or forced out. You really trust these edited documents from Schmidt? Have I ever given you a reason to doubt me? Don't you have any doubts at all? Susie pauses for a long moment before replying. No, Jake, I don't have any doubts. Tim didn't show me edited documents. These papers, she gestures to the photos on the table, are copies I made for you. Tim only showed me the actual film. I even made a call and had it reviewed at the lab. It hasn't been changed. It's genuine. I lean back, confused. How can this be? I want to see the film. Why, Jake? I had it checked quietly. Do you now doubt me? After Friday night, I definitely do. But it's not you I'm questioning. It's the film. I think it's fair to have it examined by someone else. My job, my future, even my life could be affected here. Surely you understand that. What if you ruin it? Why would I do that when I need it to show I'm innocent? And what if it doesn't go as planned? It will work out, and even if I can't prove they're fake, what's the harm in letting me check? Susie looks at me for a moment, then reaches for part of the stack of papers. I watch her sort through the pile until she finds a big envelope. She looks inside, glances at me, then throws the envelope across the table. I expect it back in one piece. Maybe this will finally make you admit what you did. Better yet, return it to Tim, she says coldly. How nice that you're on a first-name basis with him, I shoot back. Schmidt is clearly involved in this, and given how quickly you got close to him, I'm starting to wonder if you're part of this whole mess. You are infuriating, she yells. I'm not the one who cheated. Anything I may have done with Schmidt was payback, and who says I've been with him? Just a soon-to-be ex-husband trying to tarnish a good woman's name? Don't forget I was there Friday night when you confronted me. I saw your actions firsthand. Right. You were there after you got off the plane, but I was at a friend's place. She can confirm that if needed. I have no idea where Schmidt was, but he can probably confirm his whereabouts too. I heard you went to the hospital. I hope it's not something too serious. You've got to be joking, I gasp. It takes all my training as a lawyer not to lose my cool. But just as I'm about to respond, something Vicky said earlier pops into my mind. By the way, I turn to Vicky. How do you know about a severance offer? I look back at Susie. That offer was only made this morning in a private meeting. There's no way you should know about it. I hope you don't mean you'll try to hide anything, Mr. Vickers, Vicky says. That's not the issue, and you know it, Vicky, I say, looking at Susie again. How did you learn this private information? Susie just smiles and stares at me confidently. Tell me, please, I urge. Are you embarrassed about how you found out? She gives me a sharp look. I'm not embarrassed about anything except for loving you for the past 6 years. You know exactly how I found out. I got the information from the same source as those photos. I lean back with a sigh. She says that with such confidence. Even if I prove this is all a trick, I can't help but wonder if there is a chance for us. With a heavier heart, I turn to Vicky. Make sure to note what your client just said, Vicky. I may need her to repeat that under oath later on. Jake, you know you can't call her as a witness because of attorney-client privilege. I'm willing to bet that privilege won't hold up if it's questioned. She won't be talking about anything related to you, just about where the information came from. I think we're done here, Vicky says suddenly. No, we're not. I have 3 important points to discuss. First, if this divorce goes through, we are not going to split our combined income fairly. The house, for example, is in my name only and belonged to me before the marriage. We all know that property owned before marriage isn't part of marital assets in this state. But your actions complicate things, Mr. Vickers, Vicky says calmly, and we have proof of your involvement. Even if I did something wrong, I doubt it would change the situation. Besides, if Susie did something as well, wouldn't that make it fair? That's something you would need to prove, and it seems you have no evidence, Susie says happily. I grind my teeth to hold back my anger. Did you ever think about the kind of man you've brought into your life? Schmidt has made it clear he's wanted to be with you for years. Now that he's with you, do you really think he'll keep quiet? I bet plenty of people knew about Friday night before the weekend was over, I say sadly. Susie, Schmidt is not a good person. Can't you see he set all this up to hurt me? You're just part of the prize. I look at her, surprised that she can't see how Schmidt has tricked her. Anyway, I say. First, you know that someone had to take these pictures, right? Who do you think that might be? It's called a tripod with a remote trigger, Jake. What else do you want to talk about? I take a deep breath. Second, you completely cut me off from everything. Credit cards, car, clothes, shelter, everything. You left me with just a bag of wrinkled clothes. I shudder, trying to calm down. I need my car, my clothes, and my things. I need them today. Or should I go to court? I know people there, too. Susie frowns and glances at Vicky, who looks annoyed. Susie reaches into her purse and pulls out my car keys, tossing them to me. I catch them, recognizing my keys. Space D37 in the parking garage across the street, she says. Your car has your toiletries and some clothes. You can talk to my lawyer to set up a time to get your other things from the house. Now, you mentioned 3 things. Is there anything else? I look at her, wondering if she has always been this cold. Has she always been so vengeful, but I just never noticed? I just want to know why you're going ahead with this divorce without even discussing it with me. She points to the table. You're looking at both reasons. So the affidavit and the pictures? Is that really why you're divorcing me? Yes, we've had our issues, but I thought we could work through them. But I can't stay with someone who has betrayed me. So, if I show you that these claims are false, will you reconsider the divorce and talk about getting back together? Jake, please. Just accept that you made a mistake and we can both move on. I stand up, feeling anger rising inside me. I turn to the door, gripping the doorknob tightly. I didn't make a mistake, Susie, except maybe caring too much about you. I didn't cheat with Heidi. I can't explain the pictures or why Heidi signed that paper yet, but I will. I plan to contest this divorce. Just wait. I open the door and try to shut it quietly behind me. I walk quickly down the hallway and back into the reception area. I look around and see everyone staring at me. I quietly say to myself, why not just take a picture? It seems like everyone else has. Monday, 10:46 a.m. After some searching and using my car key, I finally find my car in the parking garage. I shouldn't be surprised to see trash bags in the back seat and trunk. They're filled with clothes, even my suits. As I drive out of the garage, I can't believe how much has changed in such a short time. I can't understand how she could throw everything away without even talking to me first. The photos look bad for me. I can't believe Heidi signed that document. There has to be more to this, and I need to see Heidi soon to find out. But what do I do now? My plan from last night has fallen apart because of the big issue at work. If it wasn't for what Dad said about Green, I wouldn't even know where to go from here. I have to admit I'm confused and not sure how I feel or what I want. I keep thinking this must be a mistake. I'm still flying home Friday, and this has to be a nightmare I'll wake up from. But I know it's not a dream. It's real, and I can't control my feelings. One moment I'm angry, and the next I'm feeling sad, thinking about how to fix my marriage. Oddly enough, I'm not too shaken by Susie's decision to seek a divorce. I knew I would have to show she was wrong. I just didn't expect to do it while dealing with a divorce. Sometimes I wonder if it's even worth it. If she had filed for irreconcilable differences, I might have walked away after what happened Friday. But her filing for adultery has really upset me. With a sigh, I realize that even though things have been tough, I do have a few things starting to look better. Getting my car out of the garage nearly used up all my cash, but luckily my gas tank is half full. My first stop is the Western Union office, where I pick up the $10,000 Dad sent me. I'd already picked up my new card before leaving the firm. Then I open a new account in my name and deposit 9 out of the 10,000. The last 1,000 is a nice addition to my wallet. Now I really need some help, and the first step is to follow Dad's advice. A 20-minute drive takes me out of downtown Dallas to a small business area near Love Field Airport. I park next to an office building with a sign that says Bud Green's Investigations. Bud is an old friend of my father's. He used to work for my dad managing the security side of his business. After my dad retired 7 years ago, just before Susie and I got married, he helped Bud start his own investigation company. As the lawyer for my firm, I sometimes need an independent investigator. I called Bud right away, and he has always come through for me. He's built a small but very skilled team of investigators. They are fast, trustworthy, discreet, and precise. Everything a lawyer could want. And do I have a lot to ask for now? I think to myself as I hear my phone ring. Sitting in my car, I look at Bud's office door and remember everything that has happened this morning. I reluctantly realize that Vicky was right, and I need to take action. 5 minutes later, I finish my call and dial another number. Bud Green's Investigations, I hear Tracy answer. Hi, Tracy, this is Jake. Is Bud in this morning? Oh, hi, Jake. Yes, he's here. I think he's back in the coffee room chatting with Yolanda. Let me check if he can talk. Jake, how are you doing? I hear Bud's loud voice about 10 seconds later. Hi, Bud. I've been better, to be honest. How's the coffee? I see Tracy's been sharing stories again? Well, if you can't chat with your own wife in the coffee room, who can you chat with? I hear Bud laugh for a moment. Jake, I need your help badly, I finally say. You've got a tough one, huh? We're here to help. This isn't about a company matter, it's personal and important. I don't like the sound of that, Jake. What do you need? To start, I want to move to the front of your schedule and show you a few things. You're always at the front of my schedule, Jake. I really appreciate that. When can we meet? I have a feeling this needs to happen soon, so let's get to work on it. Can we meet now? Absolutely. Do you want to meet at your office or somewhere else? I can meet you at my office. Great. When? How about now? I'm in the parking lot. I look through my car window at Bud's office and wave at him as the blinds move. What the heck, boy? Bud laughs. Get in here. I'm on my way. And a few minutes later, I'm sitting in front of his desk, sharing everything with Bud. I tell him about the confrontation I had with Susie on Friday night. I mention that she emptied our bank account and canceled my credit cards, keeping it brief but clear. I share what happened at my workplace this morning and explain everything about my meeting with Susie and our lawyer. As I speak, I notice him listening closely. He seems very focused, leaning in as I share the news. He's not judging me, though. When I'm done, we both lean back in our chairs. What do you have for me? He asks. I take out the 3 files Susie gave me earlier. I search through them until I find the affidavit and show it to him. This is said to be the original. Can we check if it's real? Bud examines it quickly. With a whistle, he replies, This doesn't show you in a good light. He removes the staple and holds the papers up to the light. At first glance, it seems real, but we need to look deeper. I'll have my top guy check this out. Great. I have a copy too, and I plan to talk to Heidi later. Do you think that's a good idea? Not really, but I have to do it. I can't believe she signed this affidavit. Bud studies me for a moment. Look, I don't think any of this is true either. But remember, it's not about what you think. It's about what you can prove, especially since you've already been blamed. I nod. Then I hand him the second file that has the negatives of the photos. I also open the third file that contains the pictures and the original affidavit Susie gave me. I lay out the 8 photographs on his desk. He looks through them quickly and whistles again. I see why she's upset with you. It can't be me, I say, but I need to confess something. Bud looks at me with surprise. I recognize the room in these pictures. That's my hotel room from a week and a half ago in Houston. He sighs. That doesn't look good. Was your secretary there too? Yes, I admit. He continues to look at the photographs and starts to rearrange them. I move to his side of the desk so I can see them better. Susie mentioned having a forensic expert check the negatives. Is there any way to know if they've been altered? That depends on how skilled the person was. Usually you can tell. He leans over one of the clearer pictures, using a magnifying glass to inspect it closely. Leaning back, he grunts. I'll have the negatives checked carefully, but from what I see, they look pretty genuine. What's troubling, Jake, is that the guy in these pictures looks just like you. He even has the same birthmark on his neck. Sighing, I answer, yeah, I noticed that too. But I can tell you one thing about these photographs. What's that? They seem to be staged. Staged. How do you know that? First, I've met your assistant. She would never get involved in something like that, and there's no way she would let herself be in a photo like that. Second, you wouldn't be silly enough to let pictures be taken either. Third, look at the nightstand by the bed. Do you see the clock and calendar there? I glance at a photo and spot the clock and calendar. Yes, I see them. What's about those? Notice how they're facing the camera instead of the bed? They should be pointing toward the bed or at least to the desk on the other side of the room. Plus, I've never seen that type of calendar in a hotel room. If there was one, it would be on the desk and not on the nightstand where it can be easily seen in the photo. Do you remember if the hotel had a calendar like that? Now that you mention it, I don't. I can't say for sure, though. I just don't recall. We can check that later, Bud says. Now, I have a few questions. The calendar shows January 15th. He looks at it again. That was a Sunday. When did you check out of the hotel? I checked out that same morning. I had other clients to see in San Antonio, and I took a small flight that afternoon. I stayed at the Marriott downtown and met with various clients from Monday to Friday before I headed home. What about your assistant? When did she check out? She checked out on Sunday too, but I think she flew back to Dallas. Well, it's not great news that she was in Houston at the same time you were, but it is good that you checked out on Sunday. Now we know the photos were set up. How can you tell? The calendar was already set to January 15th, the day you checked out, so if that's you in the photo, it must have been Saturday night since you were already in San Antonio by Sunday evening, right? Yes, that's true, but I still don't see your point. Who flips a calendar to the next day the night before? Maybe a few people do that, but most wait until morning. This calendar is on Sunday, yet the clock shows it's 1:30 a.m. Did you happen to change that calendar to Sunday before going to bed on Saturday? Hey, I say, if I had changed it, I would have remembered. There's no way I did that. So someone else did it for you. Bud smiles. But let's not get too excited. This suggests someone staged everything, but it's not proof by itself. We have a lot more to figure out. Do you remember what time you went to bed on Saturday night? Let me think. I believe it was around midnight. We all gathered in the hotel lounge to celebrate the business deal we closed earlier that day. Who was with you? Was your secretary there? Actually, she wasn't there for the celebration, but that's expected. She's quite private and usually avoids big gatherings with a lot of drinks. Where do you think she was then? I assume she was in her room, but I can't say for sure after 9 p.m. Okay, so it seems safe to say she was alone? I'd be very surprised if it was any different. Who were you celebrating with? Weston, Schmidt, and me? Schmidt? The guy you don't get along with? I chuckle. Yeah, that's him. If you don't like him, why did you celebrate together? It was more of a work thing. I've never liked him personally, but he's really good at his job. I have to admit he played a big part in closing the deal. And your little party ended around midnight? I'm not sure when they stopped. I left first around midnight. They were still enjoying their drinks. How much did you drink? Oh gosh, I'm not really sure. Were you tipsy when you went upstairs? I wouldn't say I was very drunk, but I was definitely over the limit if I had to drive home. Weston was pretty far gone. What about Schmidt? I don't think he had too much. I remember him buying 2 rounds, including one for himself, but he didn't want to drink when it was time for us. Bud seems to consider this. He raises an eyebrow and asks, "What time did you wake up on Sunday?" I reflect for a moment. I think I woke up pretty late. Yes, I remember now. It was around 9 a.m., and I was surprised I slept that long. Even when I stay up late, I usually wake around 7 a.m. Did you feel unwell? I don't really remember. But I do recall feeling a bit off. It took me a while to get going. I went for a run around 9:30 and came back at 10 o'clock. That made me feel a lot better. Did you have a headache? I had a small one, but more than anything, I felt a bit groggy. Okay, that's a good start. I want to talk to you again later. I need a full timeline of your Saturday and Sunday, and also for anyone else who was there with you. Wow, I'm not sure I can recall all the details for myself, let alone for anyone else. You understand how important this is. Knowing where everyone was will help piece this together. I nod. Okay, Bud, sounds good. You know I won't be at my office today, plus I have a couple more important things to take care of. Call me on my cell when you're ready. Sure, but hold on a moment. I need you to sign a few things, and one is important. I watch as he opens a drawer and takes out several papers. He gives me all but one and says, "You need to give these to Tracy. Answer some of her questions and sign where she tells you. That will make everything official." He pauses and writes something on the form he kept. Then he slides it to me and asks me to write down my name and address at the top. I do so and start to hand it back. "Just a moment," he says. I look at him, waiting. "You also need to sign at the bottom. This gives us permission to check your house with cameras and microphones. We can't touch her cell phone, that's against the law, but you have the right as the homeowner to set up cameras." This would have been helpful on Friday night, but it's a bit late now, don't you think? Yes, but based on what you said, it might not be too late for tonight. Suddenly his words sink in. "Do you think she is still with that guy?" He shrugs. "Could you have guessed what happened Friday evening?" I shake my head, feeling frustrated. I place the form on the desk and sign it. "Uh-oh," I say. "We have a couple of issues. 1, there's a restriction against me going near the house. I can't let you in. 2, Susie took my key. The first issue isn't a problem. You may have a restriction, but I don't, and neither does my team. You just let us do our jobs. About the second issue, don't you have a hidden key somewhere? I can pick the lock if I need to, but I'd rather not." "Of course I do," I say, slapping my forehead. "In the shed behind the house, there's a small piece of wood that isn't nailed down tightly. If I pull it out, I can find the key. But that's not all. Once you get inside, you have 30 seconds to turn off the alarm. I can give you the code I know, but what if she changed it?" "We'll take that chance. I think she'll assume you wouldn't risk breaking the restriction, so she wouldn't bother changing it. But let's be cautious. Make sure you have the alarm company's phone number. My colleague will call you when he gets inside. If the code doesn't work, you can call them right away." I smile. "That sounds like a good plan." Bud nods and extends his hand. I shake it gratefully and express my appreciation. "Have you found a lawyer yet?" he asks. "That's one of the things I still need to do. I called from your parking lot to set up an appointment." He nods. "Just remember, any journey feels long before you start. I think we just took a good first step." I thank him again as he walks me to his office door. He just shakes his head and says, "No need for that." I pause to chat with Tracy on my way out. Once I'm finally in my car, I let out a sigh, this time feeling relieved. Bud has helped me before with information from his firm, and now I need him to do it again. Monday, 12:12 p.m. 2 hours ago, I had no idea who to choose for a representative, I think. Susie is a well-respected but tough attorney. She is admired by many but scares some, too. Who would I possibly ask? I remember a conversation I had with Susie about a month ago. An old boyfriend from law school had just joined a practice in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. She told me how she caught him being unfaithful after we dated for a while. She ended things right away and didn't give him another chance. I had known him fairly well, but when my relationship with Susie got serious, I had to distance myself from him. I think he used to do family law, but has since branched out after moving to Dallas-Fort Worth. If anyone could understand my situation, it would be Bill Benner. He wouldn't be intimidated by being against Susie. After waiting for half an hour, I'm finally led into his office. "Bill," I greet him warmly, extending my hand. "Jake," he replies, shaking my hand firmly. "I hear you convinced my assistant to give you 15 minutes. He smiles slightly. "It wasn't easy," I say. "You should definitely keep her." He glances at his watch, the message clear. "How can I help you?" he asks. With limited time, I get right to the point. I settle back in the chair and outline everything that has happened over the past 4 days. I share everything, from Friday night up to just before I walked in. Several times he reacts to my story, but for the most part he listens carefully. I talk non-stop until I finish, sitting back for his questions. He looks at me for a moment. "I can't say I envy your situation," he finally says. "Neither do I. So how can I assist you?" "There are only 2 attorneys in town strong enough to stand up to Susie. Both are here in this room. I need someone to represent me, and I hope you'll agree." "Jake," he replies. "I wish I could help, but I don't handle family law anymore." "I know that. I looked into it before you stopped. I found out you were really good at it. I'm hoping you have just one more family law case in you." He looks directly at me, but I can tell he's thinking hard about my request. I see that he wants to help, but is caught between what he should do and what he wants to do. I'm about to say something when I decide to let him think it over. "Jake," he says, "I really want to help you, but I can't find the time. We have some lawyers in the firm who focus on family law. Let me call their assistant and get you connected with them. Susie would handle them easily, and you know it." I interrupt. We lock eyes for a moment, and then he holds up his hands as if they were bound. "Yeah, I know," I reply. "What if I prepare all the drafts? I need to brush up on some old skills, but if you give me a few tips, I can create drafts that you will just need to adjust. This way, you won't have to spend too much time on it, and I can still tap into your expertise." He looks at me with fresh eyes. "So you want to be my assistant and also my client? You won't try to take charge and complicate things?" "Oh, please," I laugh. "I can't promise that." He relaxes in his chair and sighs. Finally, he says, "I must be crazy. So does that mean you'll help me?" "Yes, but I know I'll regret this somehow. Do we have a meeting coming up or any documents we need right now?" With a smile, I say, "Bill, I can't thank you enough. Just wait until you see my fees." I chuckle. "There's no meeting right now." Bud Green is reviewing the original evidence. We suspect the pictures are staged but don't have solid proof. The only 2 things I have lined up are visiting Heidi this afternoon and the review committee meeting in 2 days. "Heidi, Miss Beavis, is she still your assistant?" "Yes. I don't think it's a good idea for you to see her." "Who will? I can assure you she won't meet with anyone else from this firm. It's me or nothing." I still don't like it. Neither do I. Honestly, there are a lot of things happening lately that I don't like. "You really don't think she signed that affidavit?" "I know she didn't. She wouldn't speak badly about anyone, much less lie under oath, and we didn't even have a moment together. No way did she sign that affidavit." He leans back for a moment, deep in thought. Finally, he leans forward. "All right, go talk to her, but I have one condition. I want one of my assistants to go with you to note what is said." "You don't understand. She's very shy and keeps to herself. I might have a tough time seeing her on my own. If I bring someone I don't know, she won't like that. Just a bit ago, you said I could make the decisions. I don't want you talking to her without someone to watch. Besides, I think you can persuade her to meet with my assistant. If I'm going to be your lawyer, I will make the decisions. You need someone there to keep track of what happens." I smile. "Okay, you win. When can your assistant meet? When do you want to see Miss Beavis?" "Right now, if I can." "Let me make a quick call," he says, reaching for the phone. "Sure," I reply. "While you do that, I'll try to find a good time to meet her." I stand and walk over to the window. I have Heidi's phone numbers, but I'm surprised I can't reach her at either one. For a moment, I think about leaving a message, but I change my mind. "Any luck?" Bill asks when I turn back. I shake my head. "Janine is on her way here anyway. She'll help document your meeting. I'll introduce you two and then let her take over. Also, from what you've told me about your situation with Susie, I'll have some other people from our firm look over the divorce papers. But, no but, I'll be in charge. I told you I would run this case, and I will. I'll handle all the meetings with Susie and her lawyer. We have a team here, and I intend to use them. I nod. I know this is good advice. Monday, 3:08 p.m. Okay, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but where is she? I think to myself. I look at the front of Heidi's house. I've been trying to reach her since I left Benner's office around 1 p.m. Something must not be right, I think. Getting out of the car, I walk to her front porch. First, I notice the lawn is overgrown and dry. I check the mailbox and find it empty, which worries me a little. Letting the mailbox lid drop, I glance up and down the street, then walk around the side of the house. I peek through the first window and am surprised to see it empty inside. A feeling of unease starts to creep in, and I quickly move around the house, seeing the same empty sight through each window I look into. In just a minute, I circle the house, feeling puzzled and concerned. Thinking of buying? I hear behind me, making me jump. I turn quickly to see an older man looking at me. I relax a bit and smile. No, I just got to town a few nights ago and wanted to find an old friend. I might have the wrong place, but is this where Heidi Beavis lives? I ask. I hate to break it to you, but you missed her by about a week. She moved out completely. Really? I say. By a week? That's too bad. I was hoping to have a nice chat. Do you know where she went? I'm not sure, but I don't think she's moved nearby. I did visit her once. She was friendly but didn't share much. I see. So you don't think she moved to a nearby area? I can't say for sure, just a feeling. Well, I guess there's nothing more I can do. That's a shame. Thank you for your time. I shake his hand and walk back to my car. I can feel him watching me closely. I get the sense that if he knew where Heidi went, he would have told me. Once I start the car, I wave goodbye and turn back toward Bud's place. This isn't like Heidi to leave without a word, and it feels like something is off. Monday, 4:15 p.m. I tap my pen on the notepad, trying to remember what I did in Houston over the last few days. Has it really been more than a week? Bud asked me to create a timeline of my activities and what I knew about Weston and Schmidt. I knew where they were most of the time, but there were some periods when we weren't together. I moved my chair closer to the desk in one of Bud's spare offices. After worrying about Heidi, I went straight to Bud's office to tell him what I found out. It's important to find Heidi to understand why she signed that document and if she knows anything about the pictures. But first, I need to figure out where she went and why. While driving back to Bud's, I got a call from one of his investigators. He had found the hidden key and was ready to enter the back of my house. I stayed on the line as he unlocked the back door and entered the security code. Bud was right. She didn't change the code. Once he was safely inside, he ended the call. When I arrived at Bud's, I told him about my visit to Heidi's. He grunted when he learned I went there alone and made more sounds when I shared what I found. He asked me to write down everything I could remember about her, her name, address, any relatives, and anything else that came to mind. I told him her parents were gone, and that she had a brother who was away, and she didn't like to talk about him much. I gave him all the information I had, and he hurried off. Monday, 6:32 p.m. Feeling a bit better, I hang up the phone in my hotel room. I called my father to thank him again for the money and to tell him about my day. He wasn't surprised when I mentioned Susie using the D word. He said that he had a feeling after hearing her over the weekend, but he couldn't understand why she was moving so quickly. He hoped she would take a moment to slow down and think things over. He told me to stay strong and assured me that everything would turn out fine eventually. Before this call, I tried to reach Susie. I knew I probably shouldn't have, but I was hoping to talk things out. Unfortunately, the receptionist told me that Miss Vickers is busy. In other words, Susie wasn't accepting my calls. That's when I decided to call my father. My mother answered first. The moment she recognized my voice, she put the phone down. I could hear her calling for my father. I got a drink from the mini fridge and sat in a chair by the balcony door. It was too cold to go outside, but the view of the Dallas skyline was nice. While I was sipping my drink, my phone rang. I checked and saw it was Bud. "Hey, Bud," I said as I answered. "Hi, Jake," he replied. "I thought I'd check in and see how you're doing." I chuckled. "Thanks, Bud. But is that really why you called?" Of course. I also wanted to share some good news that might lift your spirits. Did you find Heidi? No, we've just started looking, so be patient. Good things take time. Okay, what do you have for me? Grab a pen and paper. You'll want to write this down. 15 minutes later, I couldn't stop smiling. We still have a lot to sort out, Jake, Bud said. But it's a start. Get some rest tonight. The next few days might be busy. Thanks, Bud. You rest well, too, and I really appreciate your help. I leaned back in my chair and sipped my now warm drink while looking at the Dallas skyline. After the past 2 weeks, I felt like I'd been away from home for a long time. I wished I could go back home. But where is home now? Even without the situation holding me back, I doubted I would be welcomed. I wondered what Susie was doing right now. Why did she rush into things? She was always good at thinking things through. Sure, we had our disagreements like any couple, but she usually let me explain my side. What caused this sudden change? Why the anger? How could she act so strongly? And with Schmidt, the last person I expected her to turn to. How could she have done that with him? I take another sip of my beer, feeling angry inside. I finish my drink and get another from the mini fridge. Sitting back in my chair, I feel frustrated as I think about what Bud just told me. I play with my phone before deciding to call Vicky Gambino. Before I can say anything, she asks if I've thought about changing my mind about the divorce. I tell her I've been thinking about it all day and want to meet with her and Susie to share some important information. She asks if I've found a lawyer yet. I say I'm working on it. She promises to get back to me about a meeting time. Half an hour later, she calls and asks if I can meet at 8 a.m. She says Susie can meet then. I hold back my annoyance, knowing Susie usually starts her day later. Instead, I say that 8 a.m. is fine. Vicky confirms the meeting is at her office and then hangs up. After my call with Vicky, I try to reach Bill Benner but can't get through. I leave him a message about the 8 a.m. meeting. I mention there's a coffee shop in the building and I can have a coffee ready for him at 7:45 to discuss details. If he can't make it, I promise to fill him in later. I frown as I hang up, worried I might have upset him by making plans without checking with him. I sip my second beer before calling Bud again around 9:30. I want to make sure he knows about my meeting with Susie and Vicky and that I'll share the information he gave me earlier. I mention that I hope Bill can come, but I'm not sure he will. Bud asks if I have the pictures with me. When I say I do, he encourages me to use them along with the other details he shared. We say goodnight and agree to see each other tomorrow after my meeting. 7:45 a.m. I'm surprised, but happy to see Bill walking through the small lobby in front of the coffee shop. I enjoy his reaction when I show him the large coffee and muffin I saved for him. After taking care of that, I begin to update him on my conversations from the night before, especially my talk with Bud. I feel slightly better this morning. After several rough days, things seem to be looking up a bit. It would have been even better if we had found Heidi, but I wonder how far she could have gone. It's just a matter of time until we find her, which should help sort out this situation. Even after what happened last Friday, I still hope to fix my marriage with Susie. I know it won't be easy and we'll need a lot of counseling. Susie has always been very jealous, almost too much. I learned early on not to spend too long talking to any one woman at a party, and if I danced with someone else more than once, things would get chilly at home. After seeing some photos and knowing how she can react, I get why she might be upset. But emotionally, this is really hard for me. I'm not sure what's worse, the rough scene from Friday evening or her doubt in me. Before we can work things out, I need her to see things clearly. But by the time that happens, I might not want to try anymore. When I catch up Bill on everything, he scolds me for organizing this meeting without checking with him first. He warns me that if I do it again, he'll find someone else to represent me. I nod, knowing I deserve it. Once the apology is done, we spend the next few minutes going over our strategy for the 8 o'clock meeting. We discuss the photos I brought and how to best present the information we received from Bud. With a plan forming, we move our chairs back and head to the elevators. Tuesday, 8 a.m. As we walk into Gambino's office, I'm surprised to see Vicky waiting for us in the reception area. I let the two lawyers introduce themselves before she gestures for us to follow her down the hall to the same room I was in yesterday. Susie is on her phone with her back to the door when we step in. Vicky takes a seat at the table like she did the day before. Bill and I sit on the side of the table closest to the door while Susie finishes leaving a message. Susie turns and sees my lawyer. She reaches out to shake his hand but then hesitates, pulling her hand back slowly. She looks at me, smiles, and sits down. "Perfect," she says with a hint of sarcasm. "Two peas in a pod." Bill and I don't even glance at each other. We had talked about Susie's reaction when she saw that Bill was representing me, and we were pretty close in our guess. "Mr. Benner," Vicky says, addressing my lawyer. "Mr. Vickers told me yesterday on the phone that he has thought more about our proposal for how to divide the assets." I look at Bill. He smiles and turns to both women. "Actually, Miss Gambino, from what my client has said, it seems you jumped to the conclusion that he's rethought things. My client only mentioned that he has some information to share." Both women look surprised. Were they really expecting me to give in? Susie pushes back from the desk, looking frustrated. "What are you trying to pull, Jake?" she asks, upset. "Mr. Vickers is not trying anything strange, Mrs. Vickers," Bill replies, emphasizing her last name. "He has important information to share with Miss Gambino, and we are ready to show it now." "Jake, why don't you tell them what we found out yesterday?" Bill says, looking at me. I glance at the two women. Vicky seems genuinely interested, but it's hard to tell what Susie is feeling with that frown. "First, we still have the negatives, but promise to finish with them today. I'll make sure to return them to you, Vicky, by the end of tomorrow." Susie just makes a sound of impatience while Vicky nods at me. "We've been looking at the negatives and their enlargements. There are a few things in the pictures that are quite troubling," I continue. I take a folder out of my bag and lay 3 photographs on the table for Susie and Vicky to see. These 3 pictures are the 1st, 4th, and 8th in the series. It does look like the man in the pictures is me. We also know that's my hotel room in Houston. The closet door is open, showing luggage on the floor that looks like mine, and the clothing resembles what I have. I look up and see a mix of confidence and doubt on Susie's face. There's something more there, too. Is she sad? Does she want me to prove that it's not me in the pictures? But there are many things that make us question if these pictures are real, I say. "This is absurd," Susie replies, standing up. "I had my best investigator check those pictures, and he said they are real and not altered." "We're not saying the pictures were altered," Bill adds. "Then what are you saying? Because that's not what it sounded like," Susie replies sharply. Vicky then puts a hand on Susie's arm, encouraging her to sit down. "First, we are still looking at the photographs, so this is just the beginning," I explain. "In other words, you can't prove anything yet," Vicky says. "Right now, what we have is mostly our best guess, but some parts are factual. We expect to find more information today." "For example?" Vicky asks. "I'm not interested in hearing any more of their excuses or lies," Susie interrupts. "We need to listen to them, Susie," Vicky insists. "It will either be here or in court." "Okay," she says, sitting back in her chair and crossing her arms. "First, we noticed all the photographs were taken between 1:30 a.m. and 1:32 a.m. That's a very short window of time. If someone was taking these pictures secretly, like a private investigator, they would have taken many more than just 8 and would have spread them out over a longer period." I pause to see if anyone reacts. Vicky just motions for him to go on. "The second thing we want to highlight is that the man in the picture doesn't move at all, not even once during that time. We know from the clock that it lasted at least 1 minute and 2 seconds, maybe even 3. I look straight at Susie. "Susie, the man in these pictures didn't move at all for 3 minutes. Who stays completely still for that long? It just doesn't make sense." I stop when I see her cold look in response. "That's not what I meant," I say quickly. I think back to our last conversation before I left on my trip, which started all of this. We had argued about closeness, and I had accused her of not being very involved when we shared moments together. Sighing, I try to keep going. "We also want to point out that these pictures look like they were set up," using Bud's words from yesterday. "Set up? How do you figure that?" Vicky asks. "Look at the calendar and clock. They are both turned to face the camera, not the bed or the rest of the room." I pause to pull out a piece of paper from the folder. "This is a diagram of the room with measurements. You can see there's only about 4 feet from the bed to the wall. There's no chair or desk, just a lamp on that side. There's no good reason for the calendar and clock to face the window unless it was meant to show the time for whoever took the pictures. That seems like a big leap, Vicky responds. Everything you're saying is just guesswork. Actually, Bill speaks up, it doesn't make sense for the clock to be facing the window instead of the bed. Can you think of a good reason for that? Sure, Vicky replies. Mr. Vickers may have hit the snooze button and turned the clock when he got up. Or maybe while being active, he knocked the clock, and that's why he looks still in the pictures. Susie lets out a short laugh. I look at Vicky in surprise. Until now, she had kept her composure and hadn't thrown any jabs. I thought she had done a good job of staying fair. I just watched her. She met my gaze for a few seconds before slightly turning her head away. Do you have a clever answer for the calendar, too? I ask, colder now. What's wrong with the calendar? Susie asks, confused. Clearly, you were very distracted when you looked at the calendar. That's sweet of you, I reply coldly. But maybe you didn't really check with the hotel about their calendars. If you had taken the time to investigate instead of just trusting someone who is my enemy, you would have seen they don't provide a calendar in the room at all. I know that calendar wasn't mine. So who put it there? And why is it facing the window? I pause for a moment, letting that sink in. Susie, do you remember when I left Houston on my last trip? Susie stays silent at the table, arms crossed tightly, her expression icy. I let out a sigh. Let me remind you, I left on Sunday the 15th. If you say so, she answers. You know my plan for the trip. I know what you told me. Feeling frustrated, I reach into my bag and pull out another folder. I lay 2 papers down on the table. The first is my plane ticket from Houston to Austin. The second is my hotel registration for the afternoon in Austin. Both are dated the 15th. Okay, so you were in Austin that day. So what? What does the calendar in front of you show? Susie keeps staring at me, not moving. I notice Vicky leaning in closer. It says the 15th. Exactly, I say. On the evening of the 14th, Weston, Schmidt, and I had just wrapped up a big deal in Houston at the hotel. We went out to celebrate, except for Heidi, who usually avoids celebrations that involve drinks. I'm not sure about Schmidt, but Weston definitely had a few drinks. I just had 1 beer and then switched to water. The point is, who would turn a calendar to the next day before going to bed? Isn't it strange that the calendar is showing the right date at 1:30 in the morning? Didn't you think it was odd that Schmidt gave you pictures taken with an old camera? Maybe a professional would use that, but most people these days use digital cameras. Maybe Schmidt was worried you wouldn't trust the digital pictures since they can easily be edited. Didn't you find that odd? Did you see that the camera used a flash? You can even see the shadow of the chair on the wall. That flash made it easy to recognize the 2 people in the photos. So if you thought the pictures were taken secretly, they clearly were not. And using a flash means the pictures weren't taken from far away through the hotel window. So whoever was in that bed was either aware of the camera or was unable to respond. I'm not foolish enough to let anyone take pictures of me in that situation, and you know Heidi would never allow that either. I glare at Susie. For a moment, I see her expression soften as my words hit home. I sense a flicker of hope, but just as quickly the serious look returns to her face. What's your purpose here, Jake? Susie asks. Did you come just to impress us with your story? What have you really proven? Fine. The picture was taken in the room. What does that show? That you made a mistake? That you had control over Heidi? That's what you've shown. You keep talking about calendars and luggage, but in the end, it's still a picture of you and Heidi together. I can't forgive you for being unfaithful, Jake. Never. Do you get that? Now leave and stop wasting our time. I glance over at Bill. He shrugs and turns back to the women, looking right at Vicky. It's clear to Jake and me that no matter what we present, nothing will change your client's mind. Even if Schmidt came in here and admitted everything, I doubt she would change her stance. So we're going to leave. But before we go, there are a few things we need to share. First, we haven't decided whether to press charges against your client for things like assault and unlawful restraint. And if your client thinks about having a friend provide an alibi, she should remember that as a prosecutor, she could face serious trouble for lying in court or for getting others to lie. Are you accusing my client of something, Mr. Benner? Vicky asks quickly. Not at the moment. But you should inform your client that the hospital where she and Schmidt left my client the other night has a new high-quality video system. The images are so sharp that we can see details like the license plate of her car and even watch her and Schmidt arguing. We have a professional who can help understand what they were saying. As Bill speaks, I sit back and watch the color fade from Susie's face. She clearly grasps the seriousness of the situation and what could happen if we had let her mislead the truth. She also realizes that her chance to deny the affair was weaker, along with any defense against claims she hurt me. Additionally, Bill continues, we have looked at the divorce papers and there are 3 points we will challenge. First, the house was owned entirely by my client before he married Miss Vickers. We will not give up any part of the house. Second, we won't give up any part of any severance pay that might be offered. My client is ready to leave his job rather than share any severance pay linked to your client's actions. Also, be aware that we will find out the truth about this situation. If we find out that your client was involved from the start, we won't hesitate to inform the authorities. Lastly, my client won't sign the divorce papers if they blame him for the affair. We will give you until Friday to change the current request to say it's for irreconcilable differences. If that doesn't happen by the end of the day on Friday, we will file our own complaint on Monday accusing your client of the affair. This should attract some attention considering your client's position. We expect to receive more evidence in the next few days. We will send that information to Miss Gambino's office. It might be wise to wait until we have more facts before continuing our discussion. A heavy silence fills the room. There's no point, Susie finally says, her confidence returning. He's a cheater, she says, looking at me, and I won't stay with a cheater. You're mistaken, Susie. I never cheated on you, I say, holding back my thoughts since we both know she had her own mistakes. Susie points at the 3 photos being collected by Bill. Clearly you did, Jake. Bill and I stand, and I'm about to leave when Bill speaks again. Susie, Bill asks, are you completely sure that Jake cheated on you? Yes, she replies coldly. Are you really sure? Is there any chance you could be mistaken? Could you be misunderstanding what happened? Misunderstand? Susie scoffs. Look at the pictures. Look at the statement. How do you miss what you see in those photos? Are you as sure that Jake cheated on you as you were sure I cheated on you? He asks unexpectedly. I turn back, surprised by Bill's question. What is he doing? He shouldn't bring up their past now. Susie ignores me, focusing her anger on Bill. Yes, I'm just as sure, she snaps. In fact, I'm even more sure you cheated on me. I saw you with my own eyes hugging and kissing that young woman. Bill looks at her. 10 years ago, you didn't let me explain. Explain what? Susie retorts. I saw what you two were doing. It seems she was on her way to you. Yes, I'm sure. You both are dishonest men just like... Susie stops mid-sentence, and from the look on her face, it must have been something harsh. Bill sighs and starts to turn away. He looks back at me, his face flushed with anger. I begin to think it was a big mistake to ask him to help me. Then, he suddenly turns back to Susie, reaches into his shirt pocket, and pulls out an old photograph. Bill stretches across the table to hand it to Susie, but she pulls away as if he's dangerous. Bill places the photo in front of her. I take a quick glance and see a lovely blonde girl who looks very cheerful. Do you recognize the person in this photo? Bill asks. Susie looks at it and then glares up at him. Yes, I do. I rarely forget a face. She scoffs. How could I forget? That's the same girl I saw you with. If I thought Bill was angry before, I was mistaken. His anger vanishes and is replaced by rage. That girl, as you call her, is my younger sister. She was 20 in that picture, not 18. She wasn't coming to stay with me. She was heading to a spring break trip in Corpus Christi from Washington State University. She planned to stop in Austin to see her brother, whom she hadn't seen in 2 years, and she was so happy to see me that she hugged and kissed me. I wanted to introduce you two. Bill puts the photograph back into his pocket. He looks at me. I guess she made a mistake. Ready to go, Jake? He nods toward the door. As Bill opens the door, I glance back at Susie, her eyes wide with shock. When she sees me looking, the cold, stern look I've seen many times falls back over her face. I don't know who you are anymore. I think to myself as I follow Bill outside. When I close the door behind me, I hear Susie shout, "Forget you both!" I pause and open the door just enough to poke my head back inside. I look directly at Susie. "Forget us?" I repeat with a cold tone. "Susie, since you've made your choices, you'll never be with me again." I close the door and walk toward the reception area with Bill, shaking my head. No one wins in situations like this, I tell myself. Tuesday, 12:13 p.m. With nothing else to do, I've settled at Bud's place. Technically, I haven't been fired, but I sure don't feel welcome at the office. Bill needed to go back to work after our meeting with Susie and Vicky. He said he would be hard to reach for most of the day, but told me to contact Janine if anything came up. According to Tracy, Bud is down in Houston following up on a lead. I wish he had waited so I could have gone with him, but Tracy said he left early this morning. The worst part is that I feel like my life is falling apart, and I can't seem to stop it. I have good people around me, but I've always been someone who likes to take action. Just sitting around is driving me crazy. Even the report that Tracy gave me from Bud didn't help much. The audio and video from my house last night didn't show anything important. It's been a tough day and it's only noon. Today feels even harder than yesterday. At least yesterday I had things to do, even if I was running around in a panic. I notice my feelings about Susie and our marriage are changing. It's becoming harder for me to see a way through this. I'm still hurt by her actions from last Friday. Now I'm starting to think she might be involved in all of this. If I find out she is, I won't hold back my anger. I think back to the meeting this morning. As we left, I asked Bill about the stunt he pulled at the end. It frustrates me. Actually, it's more than frustration. I feel envious. He finally got to her after waiting for 10 years. Right now, I don't want to wait that long. A knock on the door surprises me, and I look up from the office I borrowed from Bud to see Tracy coming in. "Bud's on the phone for you," she says. "Bud?" I say when I pick up the phone. Tracy smiles at me and leans over the desk. For a moment, I catch my breath as she gets close. She gives me a playful smile because she knows my attention is on her, and she presses a button on the phone. Suddenly, I hear Bud talking to someone. She then switches the phone to speaker mode. "Bud?" I repeat. "What took you so long? Does Tracy need to teach you how to use a phone?" "If you only knew how close you were to the truth," I laugh. Tracy smiles and walks back to her desk, giving a little sway as she leaves. "I wish I could have gone with you, Bud." "Yeah, but you would have just slowed me down. We found some important information here, but I want to wait to tell you until I have everything organized. Can you set up a meeting for us with Benner for tomorrow morning?" "That might be tricky tomorrow morning, Bud. I have a meeting at my firm where I need to give my response. Bill and I haven't had much time to discuss their offer, and we're due to look over it tomorrow morning." "That's frustrating," Bud says. "Well, before your meeting, you need to hear what I've discovered, especially before you see your wife and her lawyer. Can you tell me what you've found so far?" "I don't want to be secretive, but I'm still gathering information, so it's best to keep things under wraps for now. We need to meet tonight. You should arrange a time for the three of us to talk, and it should be late because you'll be busy today. I need you to come to Houston right away." "Right away? Do you mean now?" "Yes, the sooner the better. But first, schedule that meeting." "Okay, I'll take care of that. I'll ask Tracy to book me a flight while I arrange the meeting for tonight. Is 9 o'clock late enough? Where should I meet you once I arrive?" 9 is too early. Actually, let's make it 10 p.m. Set the meeting for my office in Dallas. While you're in Houston, you'll have a little task too. Believe it or not, your secretary is down here." "Are you serious?" "Yes. And I know you need to talk to her, so write down this address and get here." I quickly jot down the address Bud gives me. He reminds me again to set up the meeting for tonight, and then we hang up. First, I call Janine while I head toward Tracy's desk at reception. Janine answers right away, and I tell her about finding Heidi. She immediately insists that I can't meet Heidi alone. She tells me to book her a flight too, and that she'll meet me at the airport. I hand Tracy my American Express card and ask her to book 2 tickets. I ask her to find the first available flight to Houston and a return flight that arrives at Love Field around 9 p.m. As Tracy starts working on the computer, I return to my temporary office to gather my things and prepare to leave for the airport. When I come back to Tracy's desk, she's finishing the reservations. I give her a quick thank you as she hands me 2 e-tickets and an itinerary. I call Janine to share the flight details and let her know where we'll meet at the airport. We both have to hurry to make it in time. Just as I hang up, I remember what Bud asked me to do. I quickly call Janine again and tell her we need to arrange a meeting with Bill tonight, asking if she could set it for no earlier than 10 o'clock since our flight lands at 9. She agrees to set it up. Tuesday, 3:49 p.m., Houston. Now remember, Janine, I say gently as we walk up the steps. She's a bit shy. I'll explain who you are and why you're here. Just smile and nod, okay? She looks at me and smiles, nodding her head. It makes me laugh, which is rare these last few days. Smiling, I take a look at the building where Bud said Heidi was staying. I hope this is only for a little while for both of us. There was no security at the front door, so we walked right in and went up the stairs to the second floor. The hallway was clean but a bit dark. We walked down the hall and soon stopped in front of room 211B. Taking a deep breath and glancing at Janine, I knocked on the door. At first there was silence, but then I heard soft footsteps approaching. I could see the peephole in the door cover up, followed by a surprised, "Oh my God," from the other side. There was a sound of locks being undone, and soon the door opened to reveal a startled Heidi. Given everything that's happened recently, I wasn't sure how Heidi would react to me. As I watched, her eyes filled with tears, and she stepped forward to give me a warm hug. After a moment, she stepped back, blushing slightly, and a hint of her old self returned. Shyly, she smiled at me, and that was when she noticed Janine. "I can't believe you're here, Mr. Vickers. I'm surprised you found me," she said, her eyes focused on Janine. I noticed the way she looked at Janine's snug outfit. "Mr. Vickers?" she asked with a hint of disapproval. "Heidi, you've called me Jake for 10 years. I don't see why you should change that now." A faint smile appeared on her lips, but she still looked at Janine with caution. I suddenly realized that Heidi was probably unaware of what had happened back in Dallas and might be confused about why I was with Janine. "Janine, this is Heidi Beavis, my administrative assistant and my right-hand person. Heidi, this is Janine Prescott. She's a paralegal." I decided not to say too much for now. Heidi looked at both of us, unsure, then stepped back and let us in. I had come to Heidi's home in Dallas a few times to help with repairs and other tasks. I knew most of her family lived in Houston. In fact, my last not-so-great trip included some time in Houston, which was part of the reason Heidi was here. Heidi led us into a small living room and gestured for us to sit, asking if we wanted any drinks. We both politely declined. "You're a hard person to find, Heidi," I joked. She looked embarrassed and then thoughtful. "I'm so sorry for leaving you so suddenly. I wanted to stay long enough to ensure they found someone suitable to replace me for you, but they told me not to worry about it. They said my priority was to come to Houston to help my brother." I realized that Heidi must have given answers to several questions, but I wasn't sure which questions yet. "Heidi, are you okay?" I asked with genuine concern. "Are you in trouble?" She looked confused. Yes, I'm fine. I was more worried about you. I tried to call you this morning, but no one answered your phone. Then I tried to reach Mr. Weston, but he wasn't available. I even asked the receptionist to page you, and they informed me that you don't work there anymore. Mr. Vickers, are you in trouble? They said it was just a routine matter. You didn't lose your job because of me, did you?" She glanced suspiciously at Janine, who was sitting across from me. Despite the seriousness of my situation, I found it hard to ignore Janine's crossed legs beneath her short skirt. I had to focus on Heidi. I felt stuck and unsure of what to say next. I looked at Janine, but she just shrugged. Finally, I said, "Heidi, please just tell me what's going on. Janine and I came all the way here to help you." Heidi looked at me, still confused. She shot another wary glance at Janine, who smiled back. "Didn't Miss Hinckley tell you what happened? She promised to explain why I had to leave you suddenly?" "No, please sit down and tell me." "It's terrible, Jake. I mean, I knew it could happen, but it's still so awful. Just take a deep breath and tell me." "It's about my brother, Bumper." "The one who has been struggling a bit?" "Yes, that one. He got into serious trouble this time, Jake. He got caught buying drugs, and it's the third time. The prosecutor told him he might go to jail. You know Bumper wouldn't hurt anyone. Can you imagine what those tough criminals would do to him in prison?" "When did this happen?" I asked, feeling worried. "Last week," Heidi replied, sniffling. "Right after I left Houston?" "Yes." "Why didn't you call me and let me know?" She looked confused again. "I didn't want to disturb you while you were at work in San Antonio with my problems, Jake." As your boss and your friend, I think you should have. So what's the current situation? How can I help? Jake, Heidi asked, still puzzled. What? Don't you already know? Know what? I replied, just as confused. My attention shifted for a moment as Janine shifted in her seat. I tried to stay focused on the conversation. About my brother, silly. You sent Miss Heidi is here to help me, she says, sounding a bit frustrated and pulling my attention from Janine's smile back to her face. A quick glance at Janine shows me there's more going on here than meets the eye. Miss Hinckley came to visit, didn't she? I ask. Did she help you? Didn't she reach out to you? For a second, I think about playing this game and seeing where it goes, but I shake that idea away and decide to get straight to the point. Heidi, I didn't send Miss Hinckley, so please tell me what happened. Heidi looks surprised and slowly sits down. I glance at Janine again, which I shouldn't have done, as she has adjusted her position in a way that's distracting. I clear my throat and turn my attention back to Heidi. I thought she came to see me at my house in Dallas because you asked her to. I'm pretty sure she mentioned it, Heidi explains. Can you tell me what happened, Heidi? I say firmly. For the next 20 minutes, Heidi shares almost everything about Hinckley's visit. She learned about her brother's troubles on Monday while at work and went to Tom Weston, my boss, to ask for a few days off. Tom agreed right away, so Heidi planned to go to Houston on Tuesday night. She tells me that while she was packing, her doorbell rang, and she was surprised to see Miss Hinckley, the director of HR, at her door. Heidi welcomed her in, and Hinckley expressed concern about Heidi's brother, mentioning that she also had a sibling who faced similar difficulties. As Heidi tells me, Hinckley has contacts in the local police and the prosecutor's office. She offered to help Heidi by calling around and trying to assist her brother in getting into a rehabilitation center rather than facing jail time. I pause to ask Heidi if she knows how Hinckley found out about Bumper. Heidi thinks for a moment and suggests that Mr. Weston must have mentioned it to her. I notice Janine taking notes on her device out of the corner of my eye, and I know she wants to make sure we clarify this situation. I turn back to Heidi and encourage her to continue. Heidi, naturally relieved about the chance to help her brother, agrees to Hinckley's plan with enthusiasm. True to her word, Hinckley helps her brother get into a rehabilitation center. Heidi has been in Houston since last Tuesday afternoon, and she plans to move here permanently to support her brother. She had already reached out to a real estate agent to sell her home in Dallas. I knew that Heidi's parents were divorced, her father's whereabouts unknown, while her mother often spent time with a bottle of vodka. So everything seems to be all right? I asked, feeling a bit doubtful. With Hinckley and Schmidt being so close, I suddenly remembered an old saying about gifts that should not be trusted. It's as good as it can be. If it were a perfect world, my brother wouldn't be struggling with drugs. But the center he's at looks promising. I actually have some hope he can turn things around. I smiled, truly pleased for her. She had faced many difficult times with her brother and her whole family during the time I've known her. For a moment, I thought about bringing up the affidavit, but I could see Heidi had enough challenges in her life right now. So, did you get the partnership? Heidi suddenly asked, bringing my thoughts back to the present. No, Heidi, I replied. Not at all, I thought to myself. You didn't? Heidi looked surprised. There's nothing for you to worry about, Heidi. It will work itself out in time. But Miss Hinckley said it was almost a sure thing when I saw her last Tuesday. Heidi continued. She did? I responded, feeling surprised, and I accidentally glanced over at Janine. She seemed to have been waiting for that moment and shifted slightly before crossing her legs. In that brief moment, I realized I had been caught off guard. Yes, Jake, Heidi said. She even had me sign a positive statement about your work for the company. She did? I said again, surprised. I realized I had been staring. With effort, I turned my attention back to Heidi. You signed a statement? No, it wasn't an affidavit. After working for you all these years, I know the difference. It was just a performance report. She had me sign the second page and initial both. It was 2 pages? And you said it was positive? I asked. Yes, the first page was very flattering. The second page mentioned your leadership skills and said it was an area for improvement. When I asked Miss Hinckley about that, she told me all performance reports have to include something that isn't entirely positive, no matter how well someone does. I looked at Heidi for a moment. trying to understand what she was saying. Did they copy Heidi's signature? I reached into the portfolio I brought with me and pulled out the manila folder containing a copy of the affidavit. Carefully taking it out and folding it to the second page, I handed it to Heidi. Heidi, is this the second page you mean? Heidi scrunches her face for a moment and then quickly reads the short paragraph. Yes, I think this is what I signed last week, but I don't get this notary stuff. There wasn't a notary here last week. It was just me and Miss Hinckley. Before I can stop her, Heidi flips the first page back to the top. I stand up to try to take the document from her, but Heidi reads quickly and moves away from me, holding it tightly. Oh my gosh, she exclaims. Sighing, I sit back down and let her read the whole affidavit. I glance at Janine, who is sitting quietly with her legs crossed, clearly interested in what is happening between me and Heidi. Heidi slowly sits down in the nearest chair. I watch as her face turns red, and I hear her softly whispering, "Oh my gosh." She finishes the first page and flips to the second, as if she thinks it will say something different. She stares at the document for a long time. Huh? How? Why, Jake? She stutters. Take it easy, I reply. I felt the same way when I saw it for the first time. What does this mean, Jake? She asks. This says, well, it says we're in trouble. It says you made me do things that I didn't agree to. Heidi covers her face with her hands and starts to cry. I start to get up to comfort her, but with Janine there, I remember to be cautious. Heidi, I have to ask you something I already know the answer to. Did you sign this document? No, she replies firmly. I signed your performance review. You didn't sign that document? I ask again. No, but the second page. That looks familiar, right? That is a page you signed, but the first page is different? No, I mean yes. The second page is the same. The first page is full of lies. I would never do anything like that. We never did anything like that. And you wouldn't do that to Susie. Heidi, would you sign a legal statement saying you did not agree to that document as it is written? Definitely, she says, a hint of anger in her voice. What does this all mean, Jake? Are you in trouble? Am I in trouble? Was Miss Hinckley behind this? What does this mean about my brother? Oh no, what does this all mean? It'll be okay, Heidi, I reassure her. Don't worry, you haven't done anything wrong and you're not in trouble. What matters is that you stay here in Houston and take care of your family and your brother, okay? You don't need to worry about anything else. I'll make sure of it, all right? Just keep me updated on what's happening in your life. Heidi sniffles and nods. But what about you, Jake? This is about bad behavior. That you pressured me? I smile to ease her worries. No need to worry about me, Heidi. Those who know me understand the truth. Your signature on a document will help with any further issues. And Susie? Does she know about this? She asks. I just nod. Oh, no. How is she handling this? This must be terrible. She doesn't think that we did anything, does she? Susie's having a tough time with everything, but don't worry. She still thinks well of you, just like before all this came out. So you don't need to stress. She can't really think that we did anything, can she? It's just that one page, and it looks so fake. The problem is that you're very honest. Your signature on that first document, even though it was a fake, carries weight. Plus, there are the... I pause. Heidi looks at me. There are what, Jake? I take a deep breath. There are pictures. Pictures? How can there be pictures? We've never been together. I shrug. Do you have them? I glance at Janine, trying to focus. She smiles and shrugs. They're pretty upsetting, Heidi. I don't think... Suddenly standing, she says, I don't care what you think, Jake Vickers. I have a right to see those pictures. I sigh and reach into my bag, pulling out another folder. You should sit down, Heidi. Heidi slowly sits, keeping her eyes on the folder. Once she's settled, I hand it to her. She glances at me one last time before opening it. Oh my God, she whispers, and I notice her face turn red. She looks at each picture, saying, oh my God, as her face grows darker with each one. After finishing, she puts the photos back in the folder and hands it to me. I can see how people might be confused by those pictures, Heidi says at last. She looks at me. But it's not us. It's not me. I don't have a tattoo. Tattoo? I say. I open the folder to look through the photos again. Look at the last picture, Heidi says quietly. I skip to the last photo and analyze it carefully, but I can't find anything. Just as I'm about to ask her about the tattoo, I spot it. It's in the middle of her back, just above her waist. In the last picture, she's sitting up. The sheet that covered her has slipped down a little, showing the shape of a tattoo. Wow, I say softly. This could be important. Would you be okay with us adding a statement to the document that you don't have a tattoo? Heidi nods her head. Janine quickly creates a document using her laptop software and prints it out with a small portable printer. As a notary, she can also add her official seal to the paper. It's amazing how much we've discovered in just a few hours, raising doubts about whether Heidi and I were ever in that situation together. I stand up and walk over to Heidi to give her a hug, and she wraps her arms around me. I'm sorry, Jake, she says softly. I'm sorry too, Heidi, I reply. After one more hug, Janine and I head toward the door with her. I wish her the best and remind her to call me if she needs anything. I add that I'd like to hear from her a couple of times a week, no matter what. She nods with a sniffle as Janine and I shut the door behind us. The drive to the car is quiet. We buckle our seatbelts and leave Heidi's place. Janine leans back in her seat, getting comfortable. I glance over at her and she smiles. I have to say, your haircut looks nice, I manage to say. Thanks, she laughs. I watch her for a moment when she casually lifts her hand and does something surprising. She's playful, and it makes me chuckle awkwardly. That's interesting. She grins and says, I can tell you're curious. Curious? I respond, a bit taken aback. Yes, she teases. You mentioned liking my haircut. Would you want to give it a try? I pause, feeling a mix of surprise and flattery. If my divorce goes through? She shakes her head with a laugh. If that happens, you'd be far less intriguing, she says, sitting up and behaving more formally. Just so you know, I have a strong reputation in the office. No one would believe anything you said. At that moment, I realize I need to keep my distance from the playful vibe. I try to keep things light. Believe what? I ask, pretending innocence. But I do have a question. I sneak a glance at her. She tilts her head but stays quiet. Why show off now, if you're the ice queen? Why do all this? And why me? She laughs again. Maybe I enjoy the game. Maybe I can. I sigh. That sounds more like a dodge than an answer. Do you always do this? Why me? Yes, she replies with a sly smile, leaving it at that. We continue our drive back to the airport, the silence lingering until Janine speaks up. I was curious. Curious, I repeat. In situations like yours, there's usually more to consider. Your wife likely wouldn't have tried to divorce you without a good reason. There must be something in your history. From what I understand, men seem to fall into two groups. Either they stray or they are weak. So I was curious if you were unfaithful, so I tested you. Someone unfaithful would have made a move by now. I look at her. Really? I knew we were supposed to be the simpler gender, but I didn't know we were that straightforward. I pause, waiting for her to reply, but she doesn't say anything. I look back at her. So, since I haven't approached you, you think I'm not the unfaithful type? She looks at me, a playful smile on her face. I haven't fully made up my mind yet. I shake my head as I drive through the streets near the airport. She basically just called me weak. A week ago, I might have laughed it off, but now I feel angry. Why is she acting this way after last Friday night? Then I remember she doesn't know what happened then. Bill said the details wouldn't be shared unless it was necessary. Is Janine just playing games? I suddenly think it doesn't really matter. Despite her beauty, I sense she has a lot of unresolved issues that I don't want to dive into. When I reach the terminal, I park the car. Why don't you check in while I return the car? I'll meet up with you later. She looks at me, puzzled for a moment. I could have taken the car with you. There's no need for both of us to deal with the car or the shuttle. Plus, you have that big bag with your gear. Just go ahead and I'll catch up. She looks at me for a moment, then shrugs. I think she realizes our playful back and forth has come to an end. She starts to open the door but then turns back to me, smiling as her hand rests on my leg. Don't you trust me, Jake? I look straight into her eyes. With my life. She laughs softly and pulls her hand away. She exits the car, glancing back at me through the window. Jake, you still have some things to learn. It wouldn't just be your life. It would be your pride, too. I watch her walk into the terminal and think, I'm glad there are things I still need to learn, not that I want to learn them from you. Tuesday, 9:48 p.m. Janine and I arrive back at Dallas-Fort Worth and go our separate ways. I'm thankful it wasn't a long flight from Houston because we barely spoke during the trip. I guess she didn't like how I brushed her off at the terminal. I can tell that not many men have treated her like that. After picking up my car from the short-term lot, I drive to Bud's office. Bill and I are meeting him to talk about our new findings and plan our next steps. When I get to Bud's office, I see that Bill's car is already there. As I walk in, I'm surprised to find Tracy still at her desk. Have you been here all day? I ask. No, I left earlier this afternoon, but I had to come back tonight. Bud's not here yet, but he called about 10 minutes ago. He said he was getting off the highway and would be here soon. Your lawyer is already in the conference room, she replies, nodding toward the door. Just as I start to head for the conference room, the office door swings open and Bud bursts in with a big smile. Thanks, Tracy, he says. You can head home now and tell your husband that I'll make it up to him for making you stay late. Tracy smiles and grabs her purse. She had waited for Bud to return, and I plan to thank her for it later. As she leaves, she says, You bet you will. Bud asks if my lawyer has arrived, and when she nods, he asks her to give us a moment to settle in his office. Tracy replies that she has already sent my lawyer to the conference room, and Bud nods. Bud and I walk into the conference room, and I introduce him to Bill. Bud asks us to get comfortable while he checks the latest updates on the investigation. We can hear Bud speaking with Tracy through the half-open door. After a few minutes, he thanks her for staying late and tells her to drive safely home before disappearing for a bit. Finally, he strides into the conference room. Sorry to keep you both waiting, Bud says, cheerfully moving around the table. I wanted to get the latest reports from Tracy and my team, he explains as he sits down in his chair. Looking at me, he chuckles. I know this isn't funny, but you look like you're ready to burst. So, shall we dive in? I'm all for that, I answer eagerly. Bud laughs again and says, All right, first, let's take a look at the original affidavit that they claim your secretary signed. He pulls out the original document and places it on the table. Jake, do you know anything about printers and the Secret Service? He asks. Secret Service? I reply, a bit confused. Yes, the U.S. Secret Service is part of the Treasury Department. Everyone knows they protect the president, but their original job was to safeguard the country's money supply. When there's any faking of money happening, it's the Secret Service that steps in. What does the Secret Service have to do with Susie and me? I ask, feeling a little worried. Nothing really, except they helped us out a lot. What do you mean? With computers and printers today, it's become much easier to make something that looks like a real $20 bill. To make a good fake bill, you need to use special paper and watermarks. But that's a different story. On the surface, you can print something that looks very real. The Secret Service worked with printer makers to add a hidden mark on every piece of paper. Most color printers sold in this country print a nearly invisible code on each sheet. This mark only shows up with the right kind of light. Even if you can see it, it's just a code you wouldn't understand. I start to feel excited. You mean we can find out what printer made these pages? More than that, he goes on. Since printers are linked to computers and computers track time, that hidden mark has not only the printer's unique code, but also includes the date and time. If you can see the mark and know what it means, you can tell not only which printer made the paper, but also when it was printed. It's actually easy to see the mark with the right light. The tough part is figuring out what the mark means. Sadly, each printer maker made their own code, but luckily for us, I know someone who has those codes, and I showed him your statement. What did he find out? Bill asks quickly. Both sheets of paper came from the same printer. Oh, I say, wishing it were different. But they were printed at different times, he adds with a grin. Different times? I ask again, surprised. Yes, both sheets were printed on January 17th. The second sheet was printed first at 7:03 a.m. The first sheet came later, at 10:13 p.m. How can that be? I ask, shocked. That's the day Heidi said she signed the statement, but she also said she left for Houston in the afternoon. She was in the sky when the first sheet was printed. She couldn't have signed that page. Exactly right, Jake. But if that's true, how did her initials get on it? Clearly, Heidi never signed it. To be honest, it wasn't a very good attempt to make a fake document. The second page was printed on a laser printer while Heidi's initials look real and are in black ink. We might even find out what pen was used by testing the ink, but that might be more than we need. Heidi's initials on the first page are made using printer toner. Oh no, I say softly, realizing this goes against the original document. Okay, I get the toner and ink difference, but I'm curious. If the initials on the first page came from a printer, are they the same as those on the second page? You're getting it, Jake. You're smarter than what your father says. He laughs. We checked, and the two sets of initials are not the same. We don't know exactly how it happened, but it's likely that Heidi's signature was taken from the first original page and then changed a bit before being put onto the fake first page. That page was printed later. I would have felt better if the initials matched, but at least we finally have some solid proof this is all a trick, I say quietly. There's one more thing, Jake, Bud adds. I know many people and often help them out. Bill chuckles. And who did you help out, Bud? Bud looks at Bill with a smile. I wouldn't tell you that, but I do know that your firm rents the 14th and 15th floors in a building downtown Dallas. I also know that the building's security is managed by another company, which means you need a security badge to enter the offices. Don't tell me, I grin. Yep, a friend of a friend printed out the list of badge access for your floors on January 17th from midnight to midnight on the 18th. And? I ask, eager to know more. Take a look, he says, tossing a printout onto the desk. With Bill leaning in beside me, I quickly look through the report. I focus on the entries from early morning. There were many badges checking in and out during those hours. They must be maintenance or security personnel. But two entries catch my attention. At 6:23 a.m., two badges were used on the 15th floor just moments apart. I look at Bud, feeling let down. Okay, we have two important badge numbers, but who are they? Don't lose hope, Jake. He takes another printout from the folder and places it on the desk. I laugh. You're having too much fun with this. Bill grabs the second printout, which appears to list all the badge numbers for everyone in the building. Together, we look through the list for the two numbers from 6:23. Found it, Bill says. Evelyn J. Hinckley. This is frustrating, I murmur. I give Bill the second number and watch him turn a few pages. Timothy K. Schmidt, he says. I lean back in my chair, feeling a surge of anger. I'm going to confront that guy. I glance up and see Bud looking at me seriously. He shifts his gaze to Bill. Jake, I can sense what you're thinking, and I'm sure your lawyer can too. From my own experience, I can tell you it's not worth going to jail for a woman. He glances at Bill, then adds, One day, I'll share a personal story with you. Don't dwell on this and start making plans. You've got a lot on your plate already, and you don't need any legal trouble added to it. I think about what Bud said and nod, sitting up straighter. But in my mind, I can't help but think, he's right. But, Jake, we have more evidence to review, so let's not get stuck on just one thing. We found some issues with that affidavit, but pictures can say so much, right? Let's examine these photographs closely. I had someone I trust look over the negatives. What we know is those photographs probably haven't been altered. The person who took them used regular film, not a digital camera. With digital images, you can always claim they're fake, but it's much harder to change a film negative. Whether this was done on purpose or not, it looks like they created a mostly solid set of evidence. Sorry, Jake, but the photographs appear to be real, and I have to believe that's you in them. Bud studies me for a moment before going on. That said, we suspect those photographs were staged, and we can show that with little bits of evidence. First, we know someone else took them. One of the two people in the photographs could only have operated the camera remotely on a tripod. My expert enlarged some of the photographs and focused on the objects on the nightstand. The first three pictures were taken from almost the same spot, and the clock tells us they were all taken at 1:30 a.m. Your position in those three photographs is exactly the same. Then, in the fourth picture, things start to get a bit more interesting. The time shifts to 1:31 a.m., and that's the only photo showing any change in your position. In the last four pictures, your position matches the fourth one. Unless you're counting my wife, It seems suspicious that someone would hardly move during that time. There's also something else notable about the fourth picture. My expert believes the camera moved a foot to the left. How did you know that? Bill asks. It's the calendar and the clock on the nightstand, Bud replies. He pulls out 2 more pictures from a folder, studies them briefly, and then places them on the table for Bill and me to see. Pointing to the first new picture, Bud explains, "This is a close-up of the nightstand from the third picture. From the camera's viewpoint, notice how the calendar is positioned in front and to the right of the clock. The left edge of the calendar overlaps the right edge of the clock. Now let's take a look at the view from the fourth picture." We pause for a bit as Bud points to something right away. In the larger version of the fourth picture, there's a small space between the calendar and the clock. "I see it," I say. "That space could only happen if the clock, calendar, or camera moved. It's safe to say the clock or the calendar didn't move." "Exactly," Bud replies. "My expert thinks the camera shifted about a foot to the left. I told him how tall you are, and he made some guesses about the distance from your waist to the top of your head. He figured the camera was about 9 feet away. Once he had that, he could calculate how far the camera moved." "That's great, Bud," Bill jumps in. "Now we have proof there was at least one more person in the room." "Oh, we're just getting started, Bill. I had a pretty good trip in Houston." Bud laughs. "What else did you find out?" I ask with curiosity. Bud chuckles again. "Hold on there, you got plans tonight, or—" Bud suddenly stops. "Sorry about that, Jake. That just slipped out." I shake my head, letting him know I'm fine and to keep going. A bit embarrassed, Bud continues. "I spent most of my time in Houston at the hotel you stayed in, Jake. I asked around and found out the name of the bellboy who had worked there the longest. If you want to know what's happening in a hotel, talk to the bellboys or cleaning staff. I found a young guy who had been there for years. All it took was showing him a picture of Grant to get him talking. I first showed him one of those photos and asked about the calendar. He said they didn't have anything like that in the rooms. The only way a calendar could be there is if a guest brought it. Then the bellboy started looking closely at the picture. He mentioned that the water bottle wasn't provided by the hotel. When I asked how he knew, he said the hotel only used Ice Mountain brand water, not Aquafina. So, Jake, did you bring any water into your room?" "No, I don't think so," I say, trying to remember. "I definitely didn't go out and buy any water. I usually just drink water. While I was there, I only drank what was available in the lobby or in the minibar in my room." "You told me Monday that you and some other guys were celebrating on Saturday night. What did you drink?" "I had iced tea with dinner. Then I had 1 beer and water after that. Oh, wait. I just recalled something. We each bought a couple of rounds. I was a cheap date since I was only drinking water by then. I remember Schmidt bought the last round. He said he needed to use the restroom, so he brought the drinks back himself. I didn't really need more water, but he gave me a bottle anyway. I remember taking that about half full back to my room. Suddenly, I started feeling very tired, so I hung up my things and went to my room. I can't recall much else until the next morning. I looked up at Bud. "What are you smiling about?" I asked. "Well, what you just told me matches with what else I found out." "You have more?" Bill asked. "Oh, yes, something important. I told you I became friends with the bellboy. I had him do a little favor for me. It cost some money, but it was worth it." "What was it?" I asked eagerly. "One of the first things I noticed when I walked into the hotel was the security cameras. I asked the bellboy if they were just in the lobby or all over. He told me they were only at the front desk and in the main hallways near the elevators. I asked if he could find out what room you were in and if the tape for that evening was still available. That's when I had to spend some money. But it was worth it." Bud reached into his bag and pulled out a VHS tape. My eyes widened as I watched him get up and walk over to the TV in his room. "I've watched this a few times and did a bit of extra work on it. It's ready to show you," he said. Bud pressed play on his recorder and an image appeared on the screen. It showed a hallway. On the left were 2 elevator doors, and on the right was a small convenience stand and an old ashtray turned into a trash can. Farther down, there were many hotel room doors in sight. The date and time showed it was January 15th at 1:23 a.m., and it was labeled #18 in the corner. A few seconds after the image started, we saw the left elevator open. Although we couldn't see inside, soon 2 people stepped out and started walking down the hallway. Both were wearing overcoats, and the larger one had a hat. He looked like a man by his size and how he walked. The other person had recognizable frizzy hair. It was the woman from my photos. We watched them walk down the hall. Bud explained that he counted the doors between the elevator and my room. He said they stopped right in front of my door. As we watched, we saw the man with the overcoat take out a key card, open my door, and go inside. "Oh, wow!" I exclaimed. That clearly showed someone entered my room just before the pictures were taken. "You did it, Bud." "Not so fast," Bill says. "I know this looks like it's the final piece of the puzzle, but the two skeptics I heard this morning won't see it that way." "What do you mean?" I ask. "It's clear that the woman in the photos is important, but the man could have been you. He was your height. They'll argue this means you messed up. After all, only you had your key card." "Oh no, you're right." "Hold on there, Kimosabi," Bud laughs. "I haven't shown you everything yet. This isn't the only tape I've got. I managed to get all the recordings for Jake's floor from that night. I clearly have Jake on tape going into his room a good hour and a half earlier, and he doesn't come out until the next morning. Plus, I called in some help from Houston. As soon as I saw this footage, I rushed to a video expert down there to take a look. At first, my expert said we might not get anything on the two people because they seemed to notice the camera and turned their faces away when they got close. But then he started focusing on that old chrome ashtray. He fast-forwarded to when the elevator doors start to open. Then he zoomed in and enhanced the frame near the ashtray. This is what he found on the first zoom-in. Bud reached into his bag and pulled out another folder. This time, he took out a single photograph. It was a close-up of the ashtray. Just as the elevator doors opened, we could see two people standing there. "Wow," I say. "We can almost recognize them." "Wait," Bud says. "This is a closer look at that picture." Bud pulled out another photo and laid it on the desk. Bill and I shared a glance. "Is that Schmidt?" Bill asks. I looked at the close-up again. Even though it was a bit blurry and curved, we could see the elevator doors framed like parentheses. In the middle of those doors were two faces. One belonged to the woman from my pictures. The other was the VP of sales at my firm, Thomas K. Schmidt. I whistled softly. "I'm not done yet," Bud said excitedly. "I had the bellboy check the security logs for your floor from that night. It shows someone in maintenance entered your room at 1:23 a.m. I found that person and he wouldn't confess much, only that he lost his card that night. He didn't realize it until around 4 a.m. I bet he took a bribe for this information." Bud raised his hand as I tried to speak. "Just one more thing, Jake, and then I'm finished." The bellboy recognized the woman in the photos. She's known for her high-end company. He gave me her name, and I managed to track her down. She didn't answer many questions, but she did say she was part of a practical joke. She pretended to be with you, but never really was. She even laughed and said they didn't bother to remove your pants. However, she wouldn't let me record her or sign anything. Bud smiled and tossed an audio cassette tape on the desk. But as luck would have it, my recorder was on by mistake. I recorded it anyway. It can't be used in court, but it might be helpful to a certain prosecutor. Then Bud tossed another photo on the desk, and we both looked at it. "There she is, Jake. There's your mystery lady." I leaned back and laughed, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. It was a deep laugh, one I had needed for days. I checked my watch. It was just before 10:30 p.m. I quickly called Vicky Gambino. She didn't answer, so I left a message saying that Bill and I wanted to meet with her and Susie tomorrow. We had one last thing to discuss with Susie, and if that didn't sway her about my innocence, I wouldn't fight her divorce request. While I made the call, both Bill and Bud stayed quiet. Bill put a hand on my shoulder. I smiled, and we started discussing our plan for the next day. Bud got up to brew fresh coffee, and for the next hour, we bounced around several ideas. As we were about to wrap up for the night, my cell phone rang. It was Gambino. At the same time, Bud's phone rang, so I stepped outside to take the call. Vicky said she got my message and had talked with Susie. They would meet us at Susie's office at 8:30 a.m. tomorrow. After hanging up, I returned to the conference room and told Bill, "The plan is on." Bill and I continued discussing our strategy for the next day while Bud wrapped up his call. He finally hung up and sat quietly, looking a bit uneasy. "Is something wrong, Bud?" I asked. "Not sure yet," he replied gruffly. "I still have a few things to check on. I'll let you know when the time is right." Bill and I exchanged puzzled looks. Bud seemed a bit off for someone who had just shared such valuable information. It almost felt like he was holding back, perhaps because of another case he was working on. I couldn't think of anything that could interfere with our progress today. With Bud feeling down, Bill and I silently agreed that it was time to call it a night. We shook hands, and then Bill and I headed outside for a few last words before parting ways. I drove back to my hotel and opened the minibar. I step out onto the balcony with a cold drink in hand and take a deep breath. I start to think about the last few days. It feels like life has been a wild ride since Friday. For the first time, I really reflect on what happened that night. My emotions have been all over the place. I was so angry, but I can also see how Schmidt had a part in it all. Looking back, I can understand why Susie jumped to her conclusion, but she could have talked to me instead of putting me in such a tough spot. Her response was quick and harsh, but I knew that about her before we got married. I still feel a lot of anger because she didn't give me a chance to explain, and then there's the whole issue of what she did in front of me. I know how tough she can be, but the way she set me up and then betrayed me, I wonder if we can get through this. Deep down, I know I love her. That's not in doubt. It's strange, but I don't think it's a matter of trust. This was a one-time reaction to her own feelings. I believe she'll be sorry once she learns the whole story. I head back inside my hotel room for a quick second drink before returning to the balcony. I sit down heavily, feeling the weight of wanting to fix everything, but I'm not sure how to put the pieces back together. As I gaze at the Dallas lights, I think about drowning my feelings in alcohol, but I know I need to be clear-headed for my meeting with Susie tomorrow. Halfway through my drink, my phone rings. It's Bud. He gets straight to the point and tells me to expect a package at the front desk of my hotel by 7 a.m. He mentions that there are some things in the package for Benner's eyes only. Bud makes me promise to give it to Benner without looking at the marked folders. I don't want to promise, but after a bit of back and forth, I finally agree. Bud doesn't say much while I argue. He just insists that there's a right time for everything, and this isn't it. I grunt in reply, and he makes me promise once more not to look. After the call, I think back to my time in Bud's office, trying to remember any clues about why he sounded so serious. I realize Bud didn't say much then either. A feeling of unease washes over me as I call Bill to tell him about the package. Bill is just as confused as I am and suggests we meet at our usual coffee shop by 7:45, hoping to figure out what Bud put in the package. Wednesday, 8:30 a.m. Saying I slept poorly last night would be an understatement. The hardest part was not looking at the package waiting for me at the hotel front desk. Even though it had items with Bill's name on them, I managed to hold back. I knew I had promised my old friend Bud not to peek. Bill joins me at the booth I chose in the corner. I slide over the coffee I got him, then Bud's package. He opens the box and frowns for a moment, pulling out 2 folders. He steps away to look through them as I take out the voice recorder from my jacket. It also belongs to Bill, but I broke my promise to Bud. I said I wouldn't look at the folders, but I didn't mention listening to the tape. I stare at the recorder, trying to keep my anger from spilling out. I'm upset with Susie and very frustrated with Schmidt. It's the sadness in my heart that helps me keep calm. Bill comes back and asks if I'm ready to go to Susie's office. I tell him to wait a minute and explain what I heard on the tape. He puts a gentle hand on my shoulder, and we talk about what we should do with this information. Our mood is much different than it was last night. We pick up our things and walk toward my wife's office. When we enter, both Susie and Vicky look at us with expectation. Their expressions change to confusion as they realize we are not here to fight, but rather to share heavy news. Bill takes an affidavit from his bag and hands a copy to both Susie and Vicky. "What is this?" Susie asks. "Just read it," Bill replies. "It says everything it needs to." "Where's the original?" Susie asks. "We have it and we'll return it before we leave today," Bill explains. They quickly read through the document and exchange glances. "Did you see Heidi before she signed this?" Susie asks me. "Yes, he did," Bill responds for me as I stay quiet, feeling my anger simmering. I am not sure I can speak without losing my temper. "Then I agree with your counselor. This document is clear," Susie says. "It shows that if Heidi is questioned by Jake, she will sign anything." "What?" I shout. Bill grips my forearm firmly, stopping the next words about to come out of my mouth. Of course she signed this, Jake. She has worked as your secretary for many years. She has been your partner for a long time, too. You can be quite intimidating, and it seems you pressured her into signing a new statement. Have you lost all sense of reality? I reply, surprised. You're ignoring everything you know about Heidi and me over these past 8 years? You cheated on me. I don't even know who you are anymore, Susie answers. After last Friday night, I could say the exact same thing, I snap, forgetting my promise to let Bill do the talking. He gently reminds me by squeezing my arm tighter. At least this time, Susie must look away. Only for a moment, though, and when she meets my gaze again, she's wearing a serious expression. Bill takes out another paper from his folder. This is a copy of the original document you gave my client, he says, handing each of them a copy of the original statement. We are curious if either of you noticed the very different tone between the first and second pages of the statement you believe to be correct. Did you see that the first page is a complaint? The second page talks about my client's leadership skills, like it is a job review. These 2 pages don't match. That's just your opinion, Vicky Gambino replies. Susie, I say, again forgetting my promise. Heidi told me she never saw that first page. She says the original was my job review. She says she signed the second page and was told to initial both pages. There was no notary there. Of course she'll say that, Jake. You've pressured her into helping you. How can anyone not see that she signed 2 very different statements? Doesn't that say something about her character? You know Heidi's true character very well, I counter. Now that's what I want to see, my husband defending his partner against me. I stare at her, surprised. That's quite ironic, I respond simply. Yet I can see Susie's confidence is wavering a bit. She knows I'm telling the truth about Heidi's character. She may not trust me anymore, but she hasn't lost faith in Heidi. Why hasn't Heidi said anything about this until now? She would have known about the statement last week, Susie presses. Heidi's brother has been having a hard time and was jailed. Heidi has been in Houston with her family, trying to handle the situation. Would either of you guess who got the signature on this document? Bill asks, pointing to the initial statement. Neither of them responds to Bill. The story continues. It will be updated in a few hours. Please follow our second channel to follow the story. Thank you for taking time.